Have a great one, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Simon, and good morning to everybody. Thank you for joining our 6th annual TLA conference. This is the 3rd one that we've done using the Remo platform. We've got an amazing 360 registered staff from across our 3 colleges in the KFE partnership, but also guests from our partners in Essex from the FEDEC partnership and FE Sussex for the Sussex partnership. So it's the first time we've had that wider regional aspect to the event, which is clearly, a fantastic development. There may be some of you that are familiar with using the platform, so I wanted to take a quick opportunity to run through a little bit of housekeeping. First of all, well done, because if you're here, you've jumped the first hurdle of actually using the event link, logging into Remo and joining the conference. Things naturally are very tech reliant. There are some differences with this platform to what you might be used to with Zoom and Teams, etc. And what we found from running the conferences is that its functionality is ideal for information giving type sessions. So we do now focus on that with the online conferences. So they are slightly less interactive, not so workshop based. And many of you will also know and have participated in our face-to-face conferences that are obviously trying to close the loop and enable much more in-depth networking on specific themes. So that seems to be working well. Coming back to the Digi-Lounge Hall, today, if you have had a chance to look at the programme, you should have received a link in the reminder email. If you've missed that somehow, the programme can be found on the KFE website on the events page. Open it up and you will find on page 3 a detailed table of how the order of today will run. We will be running 3 halls simultaneously at certain points. We are currently in the central hall, so when we get to just before 10 o'clock, we have our first split. Those wishing to see Matt Bromley stay in the central hall. Those wishing to see Richard Bainan, HMI, will move to the right-hand hall. To do that, there will be, at the top of the screen, you'll just see an event map written just above me, hopefully. And when you click on that, that will open up the options to move to the left or the right hall. But obviously don't go there right now because I'm not quite finished. So if you do have technical problems, these are usually due to localized Wi-Fi, etc. So do persevere. If you do have a problem with that, we may be, if you put it in the chat, we may be able to address some of those, and our colleagues that are hosting us, digital leaders, will pick up your chat and try and resolve any local problems. But we have, based on experience, concluded that most of the time it does tend to be a local issue and something that we can't help with the platform. Anyway, hopefully we won't have too many issues, and that we can press on. Just to assure you, each hall during the day will also have a colleague from digital leaders supporting it. I have sent some messaging in the chat. You'll notice on the right hand side there's a chat function. Please use that. I can see people already are. If you can't hear anything or see me, that could well be a local issue. The mic is on, the camera is on, so do sort of persevere with the settings that you've got locally and the permissions for your own devices. That aside though, do use chat. When we come to the end or through sessions, you can post Q&A specifically in the Q&A column. Don't put it in the chat because it won't get picked up. We will have a facilitator to pick up Q&A as we progress through the event and ask the questions of the various speakers and session leads as we progress. We have to stay very tight on time. You notice quite tight schedules. So without further ado, I'm going to quickly move on and kick the event off officially by inviting our wonderful keynote, Professor Ewart to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Okay. Well, I'm hoping that you can see my slides, or at least you can see the first page of my slides. I've been asked, no, I think they're coming up now. That's it, fantastic. Okay, well, I was asked to do a sort of general keynote, which would try and set the agenda, well, if not the agenda for the day, at least raise a series of issues, some of which I think are going to come up in a lot of your discussions. for the purposes of this event, the two things you probably need to know about me, other than the fact I'm a retired professor is from Oxford University, is that I am a governor of City of Glasgow College, which is the largest FE college in Scotland. And I'm also a member of the Scottish Funding Council that funds, a board member that funds all of Scotland's further and higher education. So I'm both a poacher and a gamekeeper. And I was asked to do this talk when I thought about the format for it. So next slide, please. Okay. There we are. Thank you. Okay, I thought the way I'd try and do this was by projecting, back from the future, that I'd try and tell you one possible version of what the world of English FE might look like in the year 2028. It's not the only version. There are many other ways in which things could develop from the one that I'm going to be presenting. And I am willing to make a hefty bet that every single one of you will find at least one thing I'm going to say incorrect. They'll say, that will never happen. Some of you will have many of those feelings that, that would never happen. I think the key thing is that I've tried to come up with a reasonably optimistic projection of what the future might look like, given where we're starting from at the moment. But the key thing is that it is there to provoke some thinking about what kind of future you and your colleagues would like to have 5 years from now. Because if you don't start thinking about it, you won't get your vision, you'll get somebody else's vision. And I'd argue that that's been one of the huge problems of English FE over the last 20 years, that what we've generally got has been central government policymakers' vision of what further education should look like, rather than the vision of people who actually work in the system. So with that warning provided and a purpose set out, we can move to the next slide. Okay, I think 5 years from now, it's almost inevitable that the current control system, the governance system, the accountability system will have changed. And the main reason for that will not be that DFE and secretaries of state have become any less enthusiastic about trying to control things, but devolution is changing the power balance gradually across England. I think devolution is now an unstoppable trend. If Labour win the next general election, and that's a spoiler which I, as a time traveller from 2028, can't share with you, but if they do, then I'm willing to make a hefty bet that this pace of devolution will increase because Labour have now decided that that is quite important to them. So I think mayoral combined authorities and county devolution deals, which are now supposedly on the table after the Levelling Up white paper, mean that you will see local authorities and local mayors starting to say to themselves, well, now that we control elements of the further education budget, obviously the AEB element, but also the skills element of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which is replacing European Social Fund money and which is being devolved to local authorities to make some of the spending decisions, means that local government now has money and it has priorities and it has things it wants further education colleges to be doing, and it will start asking for them. So national local tensions will remain. There will still be clashes of priorities between national government and local government, but local government will become a player. The other thing that I think will have happened is that the local skills improvement plans will have changed quite a bit from what they are now. They will stop being a shopping list exercise where local employers get together, draw up a shopping list of things they'd really like further education to provide for free and handing that over. And it will become more about employers actually having to be partners and co-producers. And I'll come back to that. But it does seem to me that change is inevitable and will happen. And it's worth pointing out that in Scotland, there's a rather different experiment called Tertiary Provision Pathfinders, which is attempting to get local further and higher education colleges together to work with employers in 2 areas of Scotland to try and improve the alignment between skills supply and what employers want. And that's quite a sophisticated model, which I think in time, lessons from that will cascade southwards towards England. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, I think the college landscape will be changing. It's absolutely clear to me that the kind of consortia or groupings like Kent colleges are only going to carry on growing. The idea of lone colleges striking out bravely into the into the wild world is going to become an increasingly rare phenomenon. There are a whole series of economic and organizational logics to groupings. And also, I think as local authorities start to regain some funding and leverage over further education, they will want to see the colleges in their local authority working together more as a system. And that they'll be very keen to encourage that. So I think that will make quite a lot of sense. I think college on college competition will also reduce. I mean, it will still exist, because not least because colleges also compete with other institutions, school sixth forms and so on, but that you will see more of a series of agreements between colleges about who specializes in what. And there are some early signs of that and some experimentation around that in Manchester with Greater Manchester Colleges Group. Also, something to be aware of, the Republic of Ireland, Wales and Scotland are now all officially trying to create tertiary education systems. In other words, they want to increasingly bring together, not necessarily merge, but bring together further and higher education to work as a single system. And the term tertiary is starting to be used even in England, though what it will lead to in England is an open question. But I think there will be more cooperation between colleges and higher education institutions, certainly elsewhere in the UK. So next slide, please. Well, what does tertiary mean? Well, sorry, the Civic University's Independent Commission on the College of the Future report in 2021, in England set this ball rolling. What I think it's going to mean ultimately is that there will, post the Alga review, there will ultimately be more sub-degree provision within the education system in England, and as there is in Scotland, and hopefully quite a lot of that activity will take place in colleges. The problem is that universities are not keen to see this development because they would much rather that everything was provided through full-time 3-year full honours degrees, which they can make a lot of money out of. But if you go to Scotland, 20% of higher education is delivered in colleges, and it is delivered through HNDs and HNCs. It's a large route. It's a very important route. And colleges are the only providers who can provide that kind of sub-degree provision on the whole. It's very, very rare for the Funding Council to allow universities to get involved in sub-degree provision. That's the role of colleges. Now, that happening in England is going to be a big stretch, but I suspect there is going to be a lot of pressure from employers, and particularly from adults who want to retrain and reskill, for part-time sub-degree provision to grow. And I would like to believe that the government have the courage to allocate and push towards more of that activity happening in colleges. We'll see what happens. But it is going to be one of the big, I think, battlegrounds between HE and FE. Next slide, please. I mean, it's already the case that some colleges and universities are starting to think about collaboration, and in a few cases, something that might be a formal merger. So Bolton College, South Bank University are two examples of mergers, but we can see other kinds of closer working relationships and formal structures beginning to emerge elsewhere. And I think it's inevitable that this is going to be on the increase by 2028. The financial pressures to share services, to share estates, to share back office functions, things like libraries, security, all those kinds of common services. It really makes sense for the local university and the local colleges to start thinking about, can we do that? And can we also provide a joined up local offer, not just for young people, but for adults? So I think we will see a lot more of that. And as I say, final bullet point on that slide, devolved local authority, devolved government and funding mean that local authorities are going to want to see the emergence over time of something that looks like a system in their area. They will want to see that rather more than they'll want to see a high level of competition. And I think that will give a real push. So the interesting question is, in any given locality, what are the players in terms of higher education, and what are the kinds of things that colleges and universities might find common ground to cooperate on? Next slide, please. All of these kinds of changes I've been talking about so far have got governance implications. For many years, I think I'd argue that further education in England has tended to obsess about, because its performance management regime dictates this, about what the Secretary of State for Education sitting in sanctuary buildings in Whittle really needs. And I think that world is going to change. Well, it's already started to change, but it's going to change more in 5 years' time as local lines of funding and accountability re-emerge. And therefore, I think there are some really big questions about how we come up with an accountability framework that accommodates both local and national need and local and national reporting lines. And I think we need to bear in mind the fact that local funders are going to expect their pound of flesh in terms of colleges being seen to be at least partially accountable to them. So some really interesting questions about what institutional mechanisms might be put in place to do that. And at the moment, I don't think we've really thought, well, certainly national government have not thought very hard about that, but I think it will be on the agenda for the next 5 years. Next slide, please. One prediction that I'm going to make, which I'm fairly sure of, but a lot of other people aren't, is that the balance in terms of the throughput in colleges, student numbers, between initial education and continuing and adult education are going to start to shift back more towards the model in the long term that you had 40 years ago. There will be more adults. I think that will be driven by technological change, digital and net zero, by labour market change, which means there's going to be a massive need for adult re- and upskilling. The reason I say that partly is because Scottish Funding Council go out on visits to the institutions we fund. We went to South Lanarkshire College, which is based in Livingston, which is a new town in Scotland, quite an industrial area. The college principal was telling us very strongly that the one thing she'd like from the Funding Council was capital funding, because she would like to be able to build some more workshop provision, because local employers are now coming to her, particularly from sectors like construction, from electrical, from independent garages, saying technological change means I've got to reskill my workforce. Can you help me do this? And in many instances, the employers are even willing to pay for this. But if you're running a small garage, you're not a franchised operation, and you are now being confronted with hybrids and increasingly electric cars, you need to reskill your technicians and fitters, because it's a completely different ballgame from mending petrol and diesel driven vehicles. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that over time. And that indicates to me that a lot of this activity is going to be delivered through reinvention of night school, through a lot more part-time learning, and through blended learning, and also stackable micro-credentials, little tiny credentials that you can build up through a credit transfer system into something bigger over time. And in Scotland, there's a consortium of colleges and universities who are busy creating a common set shared between further and higher education of stackable micro-credentials to support adult learning, which I think is a really interesting development. And I'm also willing to make a small bet that the English UK government's belief that they're going to fund adult learning from 2025 onwards through the student loan system will not turn out to be a great success, and may not even happen, because I think by 2025 the student loan system, which is already in deep crisis, will be in such crisis that the Treasury will say no. I'm going out on a limb with that prediction, but I've got a feeling that I'm going to be partially right about that. But then people always say that. They always believe their own ideas and predictions are going to come true. We'll see. Okay, next slide, please. I think another area that's going to grow a lot, and it already happens, but it happens under the radar, is business and innovation support, and the role of colleges in doing that, particularly for small and medium-sized enterprises. There's currently it's in finishing being written, a large report which was commissioned by the Gatsby Foundation from the a research organization funded by the government and run in universities called the Productivity Institute. And that's been looking at the role of colleges, which tends to be under-recognized in things like innovation and business support. Everyone knows that universities do this with cutting-edge science, things like quantum computing or biotech or whatnot. But it's more and more beginning to be realized that actually quite a lot of colleges put quite a lot of effort, without much recognition, into supporting local businesses, technology adoption, digital and green skills, business support and improvement, skills audits, helping firms to do skills audits and workplace planning, basic innovation support of a whole variety of ways. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that. And I think we're going to see more government and local authority funding to support the expansion of that, because in a lot of places, the economy is dominated by SMEs, and we know that a lot of them need a lot of help if they're to become more productive. And unless they become more productive, they will not be able to afford to pay higher wages, and we will not have a successful economy. We can't close the productivity gap between our economy and the German economy without a much broader focus on trying to get the sectors where large parts of our workforce work to actually become more productive. And colleges have a major role to play in that. And that's explicit in policy in Scotland. So, next slide, please. More generally, I think you're going to see a lot more work on local business improvement and business support, and colleges will fit into that alongside the organizations that are listed there. And I think that creating an alliance and network which can draw upon those different sources of help and support is going to be really important, because that's what happens in a lot of other countries, and it's something that Scotland is certainly trying to move towards, and I think we will see moves towards it in England by 2028. Sorry, I just had a strange announcement from the conference platform telling me that certain functionality, I don't care, so I've taken that out. Next slide, please. I'd also like to believe, but this is a very hesitant hesitant prediction for 2028 that employers will be more actively engaged in skill formation as partners and co-producers, not just around apprenticeship, but around a whole range of different things like T-level work placements and so on. I think it's fair to say that governments across the UK have, over the last 30 years, let employers off the hook to a very large extent in terms of what are the rights, roles and responsibilities of employers. They're quite often happy to talk about what rights employers have to demand things, but they've been very poor at asking employers to actually take responsibility for training their own workforce, or for doing things like expanding apprenticeships for young people, or providing enough T-level work placements. And I do think that is going to have to change, but it's a very tough sell, particularly given where we're starting from. And I think that it's going to be one of the major issues for the next 10 or 15 years of working back towards the situation you find in most developed countries, where employers are part of the skills system, not just its customers. They're actually co-producers. And that's going to be a big mountain to climb, but it's one I think we're going to have to have a go at climbing. Next slide, please. This is a slide which is something that really concerns me. There's a big role that is expected of colleges in terms of helping those who are disadvantaged learners within our education system. And quite often it's FE colleges rather than anybody else who picks up that particular task. We also know that we have a generation of students who've been scarred, a lot of them scarred by the experience of COVID and home learning, who missed out on a lot of learning. And we also know that we have a student mental health crisis which predates COVID, but is likely to have been made worse by it. So I do think that one of the big issues 5 years from hence is what we can expect of colleges and what we need to do to help colleges to deliver on that agenda. Because I think it's a very tough agenda. And quite often colleges seem to be sort of penciled in for the role of compensating for wider failings in society and our economy. I'm slightly dubious about how much colleges on their own can do. They certainly try hard, and they're probably going to need to try even harder. But I think we need to think very hard about what you can reasonably expect colleges to do and what colleges need to ask for in terms of additional help and support to fulfill that role. And also how colleges can work more closely with other partners like NHS mental health services and so on. But I do think it is going to be a really big pressing issue. It's not going to go away in the near future. Next slide, please. Right, the next three slides, which I want to rattle through very quickly, are rather specific ones. First of all, on T-levels, I've really decided to put T-levels up because the government has decided to invest so many hopes in them. And I think that they're being overloaded with expectations in terms of what they can do and what range of students they can actually cover. But as the slide there says, I think there are reasons to be cautious about how T-levels will play out. I think they're an interesting idea and actually a very good qualification, but they're probably not for everyone who's not on A-levels. I think there are quite a lot of young people and quite a lot of employer labour market demand that will not be met through T-levels. And I think that colleges need to be wary of trying to be pushed into putting students who may not be ready for T-levels into T-levels, and also thinking about how the T-level transition year is designed and delivered that makes it actually a transition year that works for students who may be starting from quite a low base. One sort of final bullet point of comfort on that is that the experiment of allowing schools to deliver T-levels, I think, will fail absolutely miserably. They'll still probably by 2028 be a few to deliver T-levels in business studies, but I think it will be an experiment that fails. Trying to get schools to do vocational learning has failed in Australia, it's failed in the USA, and in the past it's failed in England, and I will fail again for a variety of reasons that I'd be happy to talk about if I had more time. Next slide, please. Net zero, going to be very, very important, partly because of green skills. A lot of people are going to need to be retrained, reskilled, upskilled. There's going to be a lot of new job opportunities that are going to be at sub-degree level and below level 3, cable installers, installation installers, and so on. Colleges ought to be able to capitalize on that demand and to create a whole new set of business for themselves. And also, net zero is going to have huge implications for college estates. Most colleges have got buildings like every other education institution that leak heat and use up huge amounts of energy. So there's a really big questions about how we're going to change college estates, particularly now that you've gone back into the public sector through reclassification and you can't borrow money, or at least you're going to find it much harder to borrow money to do anything with your buildings. So that's going to be a real crisis for government. And I don't think they've yet realized what they've done on that one, but they will. Next slide, please. Digital skills. I feel absolutely impassioned to mention this because I think that we are heading towards some quite bumpy territory. We're quite good at revising digital qualifications that are for digital jobs. IFATE has just done a quick run through of all its digital standards. Really, in the medium term, there's going to be huge issues about what happens to jobs that are not specifically digital, but will change because of digitalization, artificial intelligence, and so on. So a lot of level 3 jobs in things like business admin and paralegals won't exist in 10 or 15 years' time because artificial intelligence will be doing those jobs. That doesn't mean that there won't be any jobs, but they'll be very different in their job content. So I'm trying to keep abreast of how digitalization is changing other jobs, how it's impacting in things like agriculture or law is going to be really, really important. And I'm not sure that we're doing a terribly good job as a country in monitoring how those sorts of changes are taking place. But it's going to be a very pressing set of issues. Next slide, please. More generally, I just flag up that there's a debate going on throughout the developed world. Hasn't really surfaced in England yet, but I'd like to believe that 5 years from now we'll have caught up a bit. And it's really a question about what is the core curriculum for also upper secondary phase students. Because at the moment, for vocational students in England, it is maths, English, bit of ICT, not much else. In many other countries, there's a much broader and deeper element of general education embedded in vocational courses at upper secondary level across practically the whole developed world. We may need to think about that in terms of what kind of learning will lay down a foundation for people that will support their return to learning as adults, that will enable them to be informed and active citizens and so on. And at the moment, we're not really having that debate, but everybody else is, or at least quite a lot of people are. And I think that debate is going to surface and it's going to raise some really interesting issues for schools and for colleges. And it'll be interesting to see how people react to that. Next slide, please. An important topic, the college workforce. By 2028, I think the professionalization of further education staffing will have ratcheted up several notches. I know that the Education and Training Foundation take this very seriously and are busy thinking about the development and the process of developing a new framework for professional development. I think there will be changes in the workforce structure as digitalization and the use of digital learning and blended learning increase. We've learned things from COVID. We really need to think how we can cement that learning into the structure of what we do. And I would very much like to believe that by 2028, we've made some progress on pay and on a realization by government that the gap between further education and secondary school teaching in terms of pay is not sustainable. But I have little doubt that this realization will bring with it much pain because it requires money. And one of the things that I would very much forecast over the next 5 years is that money is going to be in short supply, sadly. Next slide, please. We've now come pretty close to the end. You'll be pleased to know. Here are my list of the big unresolved issues that I think will be around 5 years from now. I think there'll still be a lot of debate about how much competition we have between colleges and between colleges and other providers. And I think, you know, the idea of competition and contestability is ingrained now in central government, and I think it's going to take a long time and considerable unlearning of previous learned behaviours to actually get us to a model where we think much more in terms of system. At the moment, we try and think of both simultaneously, market and system. I'm not really sure that works very well. I think there are going to be huge issues about college and indeed general governance and accountability arrangements in a much more complicated world than the past. There's going to be calls for much more local accountability. I think funding mechanisms, devolution can make funding even more complex because you have even more streams of it. So I think a really interesting set of questions about how you make funding mechanisms simple and fair. And I think that will still, debates about that will still be raging. And I think there'll be very big questions about where does the concept of tertiary education take you? And I think there'll be very interesting things to learn from Wales, where your tertiary is going to include a new tertiary authority will be covering school sixth forms, as well as colleges, as well as apprenticeships, as well as universities, and how that pans out. But it will also in Scotland Scotland will be much further towards having a tertiary system, whatever that turns out to mean. And I think there'll be some interesting learning from England. Next and last slide, please. I think that there is a really interesting issue about the role of colleges in acting as co-creators of policy. In other words, you having a vision of what you want, rather than waiting for the Secretary of State and his or her advisors to have a vision and send it to you. And I do think that colleges, and I know that Association of Colleges do a lot of work around this, but I do think that colleges and other partners need to think about this, not least in terms of their local policymakers. In other words, what do you want to say to Kent? Because frankly, when county deals roll out, you are going to see devolution hit you. And I think that having your own vision, which you can present to local policymakers and say, would you like to buy into that, is much more powerful than waiting for local policymakers to come up with a vision, not least because quite often I think they're going to struggle because they've got out of practice of thinking about education very hard or having much overview of what it might do. And I guess a final thought for you is how colleges collectively, given that the conference I'm addressing today is a collective of colleges, what is the role of colleges in developing practice and disseminating this? In Northern Ireland, there are six large merged colleges, each one of which takes curriculum and pedagogic lead for a particular subject area in Northern Ireland. They develop the teaching materials, they develop new pedagogy, they develop a curriculum to teach, say, ICT and digital, and then the other colleges adopt that. So there's, in a sense, colleges within the Northern Irish system specialise in terms of taking leadership. is that a model you want to adopt? I mean, does it make sense for every single college in England to try and develop their own specific pedagogies, their own specific teaching materials for every subject they teach? I simply raise that as a question, but I think given how tight money is going to be, how hard teaching staff are going to be to find and retain and motivate, that thinking about collective design and provision of elements of delivery is going to be really important. So there you are. That's my little vision from 2028. And I look forward now to your questions, for which we've got a reasonable amount of time. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Ewart, for that. That was fantastic. I've been sort of monitoring the chat and the Q&A. I've had some Q&As. Weirdly, people have decided to sort of text message me Q&As rather than use the Q&A column. But I think it's early days in the conference. So I've got a few questions, which I think I've done my best to interpret. We've got one that's come up in the Q&A just now. I'll ask that one. It's just a pitch. So the economy is dominated by SMEs. How do you feel we can improve engagement with this element of the economy to fully understand skills needs?
Yeah, I think it's a really important question. I mean, one of the things that really marks England out from almost every other developed country has been our refusal since about 2017, the refusal by central government and DFE to really engage with sectors of employers. So the abolition of funding by the government for sector skills councils was an interesting decision, very unusual. Nearly all other developed countries, one of the ways that they engage with employers is through sectoral organizations, so engineering, shipbuilding, and so on, retail. We've tried to do this solely through local and then sort of national bodies like the CBI. Hasn't worked, I think, terribly well. And I think one of the things that is the pendulum is beginning to swing back is towards sectors. Outside of Department for Education, sectors are starting to re-emerge as other central government departments say, well, we've got to engage with employers sectorally because that's how the world works. That's how employers organize themselves. And actually, it's how we need to plan. So at the moment, not particularly relevant, I suspect, to Kent, but just to show you things are happening, there's a UK-wide sectoral shipbuilding skills task force. And that's looking at future skill needs for the shipbuilding industry, which is about to undergo something of a mini revival. And technology is also changing shipbuilding quite rapidly. So thinking about sectors. So I think thinking about sectors is important. Thinking about LSIPs is going to be important, and how those can evolve into more of a partnership rather than, as I say, a shopping list. I think you are going to have to engage with employers collectively, but I think you're also going to have to think about business support and engagement in colleges and what kind of staffing and what kind of resources you devote to that. But without a greater outreach, the chances of meeting T-level placement needs, as T-level shift from being pilots to mainstream, is going to be really hard to meet. And I think that's going to be a major challenge for national policymakers. Employer engagement is going to mean it's going to have an individual college aspect, it's going to have a sort of Kent collective aspect, and it's going to have a national aspect in terms of DFE trying to think what kind of institutions and infrastructure is going to need to be put in place to allow colleges and universities and other education providers to work more closely with employers.
Thank you. We had a similar question come up in one of my text ones, so I think you've ticked that one off, so great stuff. Another question has popped up whilst you're answering that one. Probably don't want to spend too long on this because it's about Scotland, which isn't anywhere near Kent, but if you want to cover this quite quickly, to what extent does the Scottish tertiary system build upon differences or similarities at primary and secondary level, accepting the interest in the different system in Scotland?
I mean, I think it's working. Oh, it's a very early day, so it really is a work in progress. And I think one of the really interesting things is thinking backwards back into the school system. And there is a major, I mean, lots of elements are up in the air in Scotland, including the secondary school curriculum and how it's delivered, exams, the upper secondary phase in schools, the role of colleges, the role of universities. I think the thing that the advantage Scotland has is that the role of colleges relative to the role of universities is much more clearly defined and is linked through things called articulation agreements. And also there is a funding council, which is there to act as policeman or police person and to marshal and to try and mediate, marshal people and mediate between different sort of competing demands. We don't have that guiding mind in England. We abolished all our funding mechanisms except for ESFA. And I think that actually leaves us at a huge disadvantage. And I think one of the things that tertiary moves and discussion about tertiary will have in England is that there will be discussions about, if you move towards a tertiary system, don't you need some kind of overarching governance framework that brings FE and HE closer together, which will be a really interesting thing to think about and debate over the next 5 years.
Thank you. Next question is, what impact do you feel the schools not taking on T-levels will have on the level 3 curriculum reforms?
Well, I'm guessing that, I mean, I'm sure that lots of schools at the moment are champing at the bit to deliver T-levels. I'm predicting that this turns out not to have very many happy endings for the schools or for the students who go through this experience. I think the idea that a secondary school teacher can teach vocational subjects is pretty fanciful. They don't have the equipment, they don't have the experience, they don't have the business contacts on the whole, and I think it will end in disaster. The government, I think, are proceeding very over fast. Their desire to enforce T-levels to be a success by taking out all the competitor qualifications seems to me to be a very risky strategy. I think T-levels need to evolve. I mean, the pilots are fascinating, but you have to understand that the pilots are not representative of what T-levels are going to be anyway, because at the moment, most of the pilots have been very selective in terms of the kinds of students that are going on them. So the vast bulk of students currently going through a lot of T-level pilots in colleges want to go to university. That's not because they're very high scoring students. They're students with really good GCSEs. As T-levels broaden out, that's going to change. And in any case, T-levels were not actually designed originally, if you go back to the Sainsbury Review, to deliver entry into higher education. They were actually designed to deliver entry into work or a subsequent apprenticeship. So I think there are all sorts of things in play here. I'd really like to believe that the government takes a breath and slows down, and also it slows down in terms of things like qualification reform and change. I'd wait and see rather more before I started switching off qualifications. And I'd also see how T-levels change as they move from pilot to mass provision, because it will be a very different cohort of students with different needs and expectations. So I think the government is just being very hasty. And my experience over the last 40 years of very hasty reform is that it usually unravels. So I would urge caution.
Okay, that's an interesting point. Yeah, in Kent and Medway, we have a very interesting system of education. Without getting too much into that, because it's always a bit of a political potato about selective education at 11 plus. But certainly for the colleges, we face, I guess, as our major competitors in Kent, a very high number of small sixth forms, most of which, as you pointed out, can't really deliver T-levels. They don't have those employer connections or the skills or the facilities. And many of those sixth forms are very, very small, so not necessarily particularly sustainable, particularly, again, if BTECs are increasingly withdrawn. But interestingly, we do have a huge amount of T-level provision launched in Kent and Medway across our 3 colleges. So we're probably, and it does vary across the 3 colleges, because there's almost sort of, we have one college that's doing a lot, one that's doing a medium amount, one that's just started on the journey this year, so to speak. So we've got quite a lot of activity going on, and a lot, I guess, of what we're hearing is, this sort of economic function of education, which has always permeated through the use of the funding mechanism to force that, but it seems to be increasingly very black and white what's being offered in terms of education. So we've got a point that's come up in the chat rather than in the Q&A, and that's should we not just look at learners as a future workforce, but take a more holistic societal view?
That would be very nice.
Is that real?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's realistic in many other countries. If you go to many other countries, people on the vocational route are a much broader curricula than we have. So if you're doing an apprenticeship in Norway, which is delivered the first 2 years in school and the second 2 years in workplace, the school element continues to, you'll learn a foreign language. You'll be doing Norwegian history. You'll be doing Norwegian. You'll be doing a science subject like physics. And so on. So there's a very different assumption about the idea that people on a vocational route should still have general education for two reasons. One, because it's good for them as people and citizens. And in our world, complicated world, we need our populace to be relatively generally educated and to be good, active citizens and to have the knowledge and understanding to deal with things like climate change and net zero and all the other challenges that are being thrown up. But also because we need to give them that broad general education at the start of their lives, because they're going to have to return from time to time to lifelong learning because of technological change, or because their lives change, or they become parents, or they need new knowledge. And so we need to build that, bake that into our system. Now, we've tended to go over the years to an ever narrower conception of learning. And I think one of the most depressing things is the way in which adult and lifelong learning has just collapsed down into adult training. And, adult training is really important, don't get me wrong. But it does seem to me that we need to think more broadly about what we offer people as citizens and as human beings. And I do think that we've actually landed up with a very narrow, impoverished fare, which we offer learners, and we're going to have to think hard about that. But I'm afraid that Her Majesty's Treasury tend to be a very instrumental and rather narrowly focused set of people. And as they're the people who think they're paying for all this, their demands often win out. But as a developed economy in an increasingly complex world, I think it's going to become more and more apparent that we need to think harder about what we're offering people. You're on mute, by the way.
You'd think by now I'd get the hang of that. But anyway, yes, a question around international comparisons. So thank you for covering that off. And that one was really just around some practical examples of other nations. You mentioned Norway there, quite an interesting one. But yeah, I can just anecdotally, I've got quite an international family, and on the sort of slightly German side, the third child of the family went to university was actually regarded as the failure, because the other two went for a technical education with Mercedes. So it's quite interesting. The other two are engineers, this one's more in the US. So I think it's, there's always differences in every country. And also looking at compilation of league tables for level 2 or 3 attainment. Some countries, I believe, even include the driving license. So you might be able to tick off your maths challenge by braking distance. I don't know. Anyway, I think we're almost at the end. I'm just having a little check of my questions that I've got here in case we have time for one more. I kind of guess this is picked up on some of the points that you were making around staffing and CPD. Is there ever enough CPD? And does it just tend to adapt to fashion or crisis?
I think that CPD is really, really important. I think that, the world is changing very rapidly. Qualifications are changing very rapidly. They're going to carry on changing. The technologies of which are associated with vocational subjects and occupations are changing very rapidly, and the actual process of teaching and pedagogy has changed fundamentally. A great leap forward, however imperfect, during COVID. So I think there are enormous retraining needs, and of course, all the training needs of college managers in every form that word manager covers. We're going to need a more skilled college workforce. There's no two ways about that. And so, the more we can think about both formal and informal CPD, mentoring, coaching, learning, peer group learning, the better. Because you cannot have too skilled a college workforce if you want to deliver high quality learning. I think that's my message to people. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of today.
Yes, well, thank you very much. I'll just quickly, just to round up, we had some questions around net zero, because you did mention that aspect, and interestingly also the digital and AI. It was just to note that off the back of the L6 Kent and Medway, we've also got some skills development fund projects covering both of those areas, which I think is quite interesting, because particularly the area around digital and AI, we're doing quite a lot of work around immersive technologies and so on, and we've got a number of inputs in the rest of this conference on that topic. So the specific CPD around that is going to be very interesting. And equally, what does good actually look like, good or better delivery in that area? I think it's going to be a really interesting one, because it's so new. And that's pertinent to raise, because our colleagues in Essex, some of which are joining us today, and in Sussex, are also doing SDF2 projects around the digital and AI area particularly. But just to finish, I'd like to say thank you on behalf of all of our guests and delegates here today, and on behalf of Kent Further Education. I think that was fantastic, and I will let you carry on with the rest of your life on a Friday. And
we'll be answering emails. Just to let Colin.
Yeah, well, indeed, that's what Fridays can be like. It is. Just catching up on the rest. And huge thanks. And what will happen next, just to let our delegates know, we'll briefly return to our floor plan mode, but it's our chance to say cheerio to you. There are some interactive functions, and I know there's some positive comments in the chat, which are saying many thanks to you. But there's little rounds of applause and thumbs up.
Yes, I can see.
Feel free to hit those buttons if it helps on a Friday. It's good therapy. But again, very, very much a huge thank you, Ewart. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you. Okay, for other colleagues, as I tried to explain in the chat column, if you there's quite a lot of thank yous in there now, so very grateful for that. And again, just reiterating thanks to Ewart for that input. We're at a critical point now where we are going to change over very shortly. So if you are going to wish to stay in the central hall where you are now, our next speaker is Matt Bromley, who is well known to us in Kent, and has been to us for, I think probably it was one of our last face-to-face conferences that we managed to do pre-COVID. And I remember on that instance that it was actually Valentine's Day, which got Matt into a bit of trouble because he has to travel some distance from the north. But anyway, I think we've got over that. And despite that, he's still been friendly enough to come back to us on occasion. So welcome back, Matt. If you are wanting to hear the Richard Bainan session, if you look at your screen as you see it now, at the top above Matt and I, there's it says event map. If you click on that, you need to move across to the right hall. So click on that and you will repopulate in the right hall, a bit like a video game, and then Richard's session will commence from there. I'm going to go there as well, Matt, so apologies that I'm heading there, because I'm going to try and support Richard's session for the Q&A, and you will have the support of Bev for yours, if that's okay. And we just got about 1 minute before we start. I'm just going to quickly check the chat to make sure everything's okay. Excellent. But are you well, Matt?
I am. I'm very well, thank you. Yes, all good. And the conference has started well. I enjoyed Ewart's session. So it's all downhill from here.
Well, I always feel like if it started, at least we started. So I can sort of tick that it's live and you're here. So I feel like we're making some excellent progress. But enjoy your session. Hope delegates enjoy your session. And I will see other delegates in the right-hand hall in just a moment. I will leave you in Bev's capable hands.
Thank you.
I'll see you later.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I know it is 1 minute to 10, and I'm sure some of you will still be navigating the platform here and moving to another session, but I will make a start. Hopefully you can see me and you can see my slides alongside me. If not, I'm sure somebody will notify me of that, but it looks good from my position here. So yes, as Mark said, this is the third Teaching, Learning and Assessment Conference for Kent FE that I've been lucky enough to have been invited to speak at. I say lucky, it seems the timing of these conferences has, as Mark intimated there, always been somewhat unlucky. The first time I spoke at this conference, some of you may recall, was in person in Maidstone, and it did necessitate me missing Valentine's night, for which I was in the doghouse for quite a number of weeks, let's be honest, after that. The second time I spoke at the conference, I missed a loved one's birthday, and today, as luck would have it, the conference falls on the day building work begins just to this side of me here. So with apologies in advance for any ambient noises off, which is a euphemistic way of saying lots of loud banging and drilling. I can hear it. I'm hoping you cannot. But if I start to shout at you or lose my thread, then I'm going to blame the background noise for that, and not for the fact that perhaps I'm just getting old and forgetful. But hopefully it won't be too distracting for you, because in this session, I'd like to talk to you about what works in the FE classroom. Now, I'm going to start with a slight sort of caveat or health warning. Well, two, actually, health warnings. The first is, of course, teaching is a very complex and nuanced art form, and what works with one teacher and one class at one point in time might not work with another teacher and another class at another point in time, because context is absolutely integral, it's key. And so pragmatism is all. However, I have discerned over a number of years of working with lots of FE colleges, a set of 10 common features of effective practice, which I want to share with you today. But it does come with that health warning that, of course, context is important. And I don't want anyone to regard this session as being a blueprint or a checklist that you must follow point by point. And if you do, as I suggest in this session, then suddenly you will have wholly effective, outstanding lessons every single time that you teach. Of course, that's not the case. The second caveat or health warning is, well, it's the title, actually. It's the word classroom, which is a misnomer, because what I want to talk to you about today is what tends to work in FE learning spaces, not just in the classroom, but in the sports field, in the lab, in the workshop, and in the workplace. So it's not just about classroom-based learning, and certainly not just about the learning that takes place in a physical classroom. So I hope that was clear from the conference program. But I do want to share with you some of my thoughts on what tends to work. So I'll just very quickly introduce myself for those of you who have not met before or who've not heard me speak. So my name is Matt Bromley. I've worked in education for over 20 years. I stopped counting at 20. I think it is over 25 now, but let's just stick with over 20 years, because there's a point at which the amount of authority or experience that you want to share with colleagues tips over into just sounding old. So I'm going to stick with just over 20 years of experience in teaching and leadership, including in schools as a head teacher and principal, and in FE colleges as, amongst other things, a deputy principal. These days I speak at conferences, of course. I do sort of training courses. I contribute to a number of magazines. I write books. And one of the things I do most of the time is I go into colleges and support them in improving the quality of education that they provide. And that's why I'm talking to you today, to share some of what I've seen. What I'm not here to do is tell you what I think works or what I would do if I were you, what I'm here to do is, as a magpie, is just to share with you all of these silver trinkets that I've collected over many years of working with many, many colleges, in the hope that that might be a bit of a help to you as well. So when I do go into colleges, I often share this slide, first of all. When we talk about how to improve the quality of education colleges provide, I share this slide because it articulates my thinking and a process for tackling that subject of how do we improve the quality of education that we provide, because it starts with the curriculum, because the curriculum provides the foundations on which everything else that we do are built. If we don't have an effective, well-planned, responsive, innovative curriculum, then no matter the quality of teaching that we can provide, no matter how effective our assessment, marking and feedback processes are, we will not achieve the same excellent outcomes. So it starts with the curriculum. So let me share with you some thoughts on each of those 3 stages. First of all, just by way of context, and then I'll get into those top 10 tips of what tends to work in the FE classroom. In terms of the curriculum then, I've got these 6 steps of thinking about the curriculum, of all the planning that happens before teaching happens. Now, I won't go through this point by point. I will just sort of share some brief headlines from that, but then I will signpost you to some further information should you want to know a little bit more. But these 6 steps of curriculum, or intent, to use the Ofsted term, are a way of thinking about and approaching how we can design an ambitious, broad and balanced, planned and sequenced curriculum to which all our learners have equitable access. Now, by equitable, what I mean is that we have an ambitious curriculum, it embodies high expectations, but we deliver that in different ways for different learners, because we acknowledge that those who start at a disadvantage, who have additional and different needs, or who perhaps have a vulnerability or a socioeconomic disadvantage, need us to do more. So we do more for those that start with less, in other words. So equitable as opposed to equal. At the heart of this is planning a progressive curriculum, is understanding what success looks like, understanding within a study programme and within each of the elements of a study programme exactly what excellence looks like, and then working towards that, working towards excellence. So we need to understand then where our learners start from, and then we plan or we plot that course, we plot that journey from the start to the finish. And we do that in a way that builds in increasing complexity, increasing challenge over time, and in a way that is continuous, that provides a journey for our learners to follow. Then, when we have done that, the second stage of the process is to deliver that curriculum in a way that makes sense to our learners. So in other words, in a way that talks to their lived experiences, so that we understand what they already know and can do. We understand what experience of life, of the world they bring with them to college, and we build upon that, because all information, all knowledge builds upon prior knowledge. And so we utilize that prior knowledge in order to help learners to access our curriculum and to develop further such knowledge. Now, at the heart of this process of teaching or implementation, the Ofsted language, is cognitive theory, the work of John Sweller from 1988, which has since been refined by a number of other thinkers and educational psychologists and cognitive scientists and so on, and the work of Atkinson and Shiflin, who developed the multi-memory store model. So at the heart of this is an understanding of how learning happens, an understanding of the importance of gaining the active attention of our students' working memories and making them think hard but efficiently about the curriculum content that we need them to acquire, in order that they encode content into long-term memory. And then it's about making sure that we build into our teaching frequent retrieval, so that all the knowledge and skills that learners have acquired is kept active and accessible and is built upon by further skills. only when we have designed an ambitious, broad and balanced sequenced curriculum, and then we've translated that in practice in a way that talks to our students' lived experiences and in a way that leads to long-term learning, can we move on, I think, to assessment, to impact in the Ofsted language. And this 6-step process is all about how we can ensure that all of our assessment are meaningful, are manageable, and are motivating to learners. So we sense check the way that we assess according to its purpose. Question, why are we assessing? To help our learners to make more progress and achieve better outcomes. If not, why are we doing it? Is it inauthentic? Then, after purpose, it's about the process, the way, the how, the way in which we are assessing, making sure that the assessment is reliable, it's as efficient and effective as possible. And then, and only then, do we move on to validity, understanding whether or not the data we're going to garner from an assessment tells us what we think it will. Are we progress between 2 points when in fact those 2 points assess completely different things? So we're comparing apples and oranges. So this final 6-step process is all about assessment and making sure that our marking is meaningful, manageable, and motivating to learners. And it closes the feedback loop. So it helps our learners to make further such. Now, if you want to know more about those 3 6-step processes of intent, implementation, and impact, then, well, you can buy the books. Forgive me the slight plug, but if you do want to have a look at the books, you will find them on bit.ly/MJ Bromley, as well as a number of other books that might be of use to you. But if you don't want to part with your hard-earned cash, which I would understand, then instead, you can access a free summary of each of those 6-step processes via bit.ly/curriculum central. Okay, so let's move on, and we'll come on to in a moment those top 10 tips, those top 10 features of an effective FE classroom. But I want to just step back slightly before I do that. I want to share with you this book, Start With Why by Simon Sinek, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. If not, just very briefly. In this book, Sinek talks about what makes some organizations more successful than others. And he introduces the concept of the golden circle, which is, in fact, as you'll see from my slide, 3 concentric circles. Sinek argued the mediocre organizations, the average performing organizations, start on the outside and work their way into the middle. So they start with what? They articulate what they do. The example that Sinek uses in the book is Microsoft. He says that Microsoft start with what? They articulate what they do as an organization, which is to make computer software. Then answer the how question. How do we do that? Well, they make sure that the software is easy to use and it looks good. And that's where their thinking ends. The most successful organizations, by contrast, start in the middle. They start with why, and then they work their way outwards. So they articulate why they do what they do. Now, Sinek is clear. The answer to the why question is not to make money. Of course, organizations need to turn a profit in order to be successful, just as we need to earn a living to pay our mortgages and to feed our kids. But let's be honest, all of us working in education don't do it for the money. There are ways of making money. So why do we do this instead of something easier? The example that Sinek uses in the book is Apple. He says they start with why. They begin by articulating their purpose, their raison d'etre. And he says that Apple's answer is to challenge the status quo. In all that they do, they wish to challenge the status quo. How? Making sure that whatever they do is beautiful and intuitive. What? They happen to make phones, tablets, laptops, and so on. Now, I think we should also start with why. We should, whenever we engage in a conference or in CPD, whenever we consider our day jobs, providing a quality of education, teaching and learning and assessment, we should start with why. Why do we do what we do, and why do we want to get better at doing what we do? Well, all of us have very different answers, I'm sure, to why we do what we do. So let's focus on why it's important to continue to engage in the profession, in professional development, and seek to get better at what we do? Well, here's a couple of answers to that question anyway. In a study by Hannah and Livkin from 2016, the researchers found that in the classrooms of the most effective teachers, out of 50 teachers who were surveyed and studied and researched, learners made a set amount of progress within 6 months. In the classrooms of the least effective teachers out of those 50, learners took 2 years to achieve the same amount of progress. So Hannah and Livkin concluded that the quality of the teacher and the quality of their teaching had a huge impact on learner progress. In fact, it very much is supported by a whole host of other research that says that the quality of teaching is the most important factor determining outcomes for pupils and learners in colleges. Of course, there are many other factors that determine how well learners achieve, but the quality of the teacher and their teaching is the most impactful factor. So in this case, most and the least effective teacher out of 50, there was 18 months of dead time for learners. What's more, in a study by Hamer and Pianta in 2015, in the classrooms of the most effective teachers, socioeconomic differences amongst learners were null and void. In other words, the most disadvantaged learners made the same amount of progress in the same time as the least disadvantaged. So again, the quality of the teacher and what they do in the classroom is the most important factor. What else can we say in terms of the why? We also know that what we do as educators, the product, if you like, that we produce, an education, is hugely important, not just now in the short term, but also over the course of our learners' lives. Because research the world over tells us that more educated people live longer, healthier lives. More educated people are more likely to contribute to society, to vote and to be active citizens. And more educated people are more likely to succeed in the world of work, to earn more in the future. So what we do matters now in terms of learner progress and outcomes, but it matters over the long term as well. That's one answer to the why question of why do we want to engage in a such as this and continue to improve. Then how can we improve what we are learners? You just have to forgive me. The slides do keep moving backwards, and I'm not quite sure why they backwards in that way. So apologies if you're getting confused by the slide that's on screen and what I'm saying. I'm going to try and fix that for you. So the how question: how can we improve the quality of education that we provide? Again, a whole host of answers to this. I'm just going to try the answer for you before we move on. One answer is we could do nothing, because evidence suggests that we are, as teachers, a self-improving profession. Left to our own devices, we will learn and we will improve. But that self-propelled improvement is slow and it tends to plateau after about 5 years of service. So if you've worked in education for more than 5 years, it's unlikely that the quality of education that you provide is going to get much better left to your devices. So what can we do to expedite improvements in the quality of our teaching? The work of Viviane Robinson in her book Student-Centered Leadership provides 5 possible answers to that question. So having clear targets for learners is important. Making sure we've got the resources, the kit, the technology is important. Making sure that we have an orderly learning environment is important too. But out in the lead, in terms of having a significant demonstrable impact on outcomes for learners, is leading on, engaging in teaching and learning development. It's focusing on what we do as teachers in that space between us and our learners and seeking to improve the quality of our teaching. Then, should we focus on what elements of teaching perhaps are the most important, have the most demonstrable impact? Well, luckily these days there is no shortage of evidence to give us a starting point in answering that question of what should we focus on. And so you can look at, for example, the Education Endowment Foundation's Teaching and Learning Toolkit. You can look at the work of others who produce meta-analyses that summarize the education research that is available, and all will tell you pretty much the same things. topping the chart in pretty much every meta-analysis of what works in the classroom is feedback. Now, of course, important caveat, that doesn't mean feedback good, do more feedback. It means that feedback, when it's done effectively, can have a huge impact on our learners' progress and outcomes. Now, when it's done effectively, it often means when it's done less often, but when it's done at key points where it will have more impact on learners. And then it's making sure that we don't just give the feedback to learners, but we give them time in lessons to process, to question, and to act on that feedback. What else? If you were to distill the research evidence that's available, I would say that, and I mean, this is simplifying it certainly, and it is more complex than this, but I would say that if you were to distill in terms of what works and what to focus on, you'd come up with something like this, because an effective learning environment is one in which our learners are challenged, engaged, and make progress. So a focus on challenge is about the pace and the pitch of lessons. It's about making sure that we know where our learners are and that we are pitching learning appropriately. We pitch it high, we teach to the top, we embody high expectations at all times. Likewise, the pace. It's making sure that learning is suitably paced for all learners in a class. And then in terms of engagement, I mean, engagement is synonymous not with fun, but with active involvement, being an active participant in the process of learning. So engagement is about making sure that our learners are made to think and do. Now, we can do that through explicitly teaching them how to become more metacognitive, developing metacognitive knowledge and self-regulation skills so they can start to take ownership of their own learning and their own thinking. It's also about using active teaching strategies like dialogic teaching, so the use of effective questioning in class and so on. But it's making sure that our learners are made to think and do in lessons. That leads to engagement. And progress is about high quality feedback. It's about assessment that works and giving actionable, small step feedback to learners on which they can and do act. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because what I really want to do in this session, that was a bit of context, but what I really want to do is give you something tangible, give you some top tips, things to consider in your own planning and teaching. Now, as I said at the start of this session, most of my day job these days involves going into colleges and providing a critical friend service, supporting colleges with improving the quality of education they provide. And that gives me a huge opportunity, which I'm very grateful for, to go in and watch, to observe hundreds and thousands of FE teachers toiling away at the chalk face every day. And through that, and extrapolating what I see teachers do and looking at their planning and talking to them and learners, extrapolating that and triangulating it with outcomes for learners and how successful colleges are, I've been able to discern this list of 10 features that all of the most successful colleges with the best outcomes for learners have in common. Now, again, I'm going to issue that caveat. This is not to be treated as a checklist, and that if you were to tick off all 10 features, then suddenly everything would be amazing and wonderful. That's not the case, of course. But this is a list of the most features that I've been able to observe in the most successful colleges. So I hope it provides a starting point for your thinking and perhaps a framework for self-evaluating what you do in your own practice. So I'm going to share those 10 tips with you now. So tip 1 then is that in those successful colleges, lessons were clearly planned. Now, that is not to say they were lesson plans. Significant difference, isn't there, between a lesson plan and a planned lesson. Now, what I saw was evidence that there was clear thinking about the structure of lessons, and not just individual lessons, but of sequences of lessons. In other words, there was a clarity for the teacher themselves, but also for the learners about what success would look like at the end of this sequence of lessons. The body of knowledge, to use Ofsted's language, was very clear. It was clear to all exactly what knowledge, skills, and understanding learners were expected to acquire and why that knowledge, skills, and understanding was important to learners. 2 key questions to ask that I found particularly useful in this is why this, why then? As teachers and perhaps as leaders as well, if we keep asking why this and why then, we're going to sharpen our thinking around our planning, about planning an ambitious, broad and balanced sequenced curriculum. Because why this gets us to question the value choices that we make as teachers. Why have we selected this knowledge or this skill to be taught to learners? Why is this important to them? Why will this, or how will this, contribute towards their success? How will they use this knowledge or this skill in the future? Now, I say value choice because, of course, we're led by awarding bodies. We're led by external influences and influencing what we must deliver so that our learners are prepared for a formal assessment. But we do make choices about exactly which topics or units or knowledge or skills we teach, when we teach it, and how much time we give to the teaching of that knowledge and those skills. So what are those value choices based on? So why are we teaching this knowledge, these skills, this understanding? And then the why then question gets us thinking about the order and the organization of lessons. Why are we teaching this knowledge or skill at this point in time? What have we done previously to build towards the study of this knowledge or these skills? How does it fit into a wider sequence, to that bigger picture of learning? So what have we done to prepare learners for the study of this thing? And what will happen next? How will we build upon and extend this knowledge or these skills in the future? How will it be assessed? How will it be utilized? How will it be applied fluently in a real life setting? So the first tip then, or the first part of number one, is that lessons are clearly planned in those most successful colleges. There is a clarity about what success looks like and about the knowledge, skills, and understanding that we want students to acquire and why that is important to them. Then, and I'm following on slightly from my point about the why then question, but when they're planned, when there's a clarity about the body of knowledge to be learned, they're then sequenced logically over time. So it is in part what I've said about making sure that what we teach today builds upon what went before, but it's also about making sure that we keep all those plates spinning as well. So all that prior knowledge, all those skills that have been taught in the past are kept active and accessible, and we build upon it. So the sequencing is about baking into our planning the retrieval practice, so that prior knowledge doesn't decay over time, but is kept active and accessible for our learners, and we help them to build upon that knowledge. Now, that's also part about making sure that when we do get students to engage in the retrieval practice, they don't just retrieve prior knowledge in the same way each time, but they do something different with it. They demonstrate in a different way, or they add that prior knowledge to something new each time, so that we're building not just the retrieval strength, but the storage strength as well. Then, still on tip one, in those most successful colleges, when they have planned and sequenced lessons, they are clear that the knowledge to be learnt is ambitious. It represents excellence. It embodies high expectations, and they will teach to the top. And it is broad and balanced in the sense that it provides a breadth and depth of knowledge, skills, and understanding. It doesn't perpetuate any knowledge gaps, and it makes sure that learners are prepared for what comes next. Number two, once number one has happened, once we have a clearly planned and sequenced curriculum, which is ambitious and it's broad and balanced, then in the most successful colleges, that curriculum is taught to all learners, irrespective of starting point, irrespective of additional and different needs, of high needs or disadvantages. All learners are given access to the same ambitious curriculum. It starts with equality of opportunity. So all our learners are given access to that same ambitious content. In other words, in those successful colleges, teachers don't dumb down. They don't reduce the curriculum for some learners because of their starting point. But of course, that's not enough in and of itself, because students are different. They do have different capacities to know and do more. And so if we just fed all same diet, a one-size-fits-all approach, then we would just be deepening existing disadvantages and differences. So those students that start at a lower point will continue to flounder, and perhaps that gap that attainment gap will just widen over time. So it starts with equality, but the second part of this process is equity. Now, the difference between the two, I don't want to teach them how to suck eggs, but equality is doing the same for all. Equity is about doing different things for different learners in order to ensure fairness. Equity is about doing more for those that start with less. So we give all learners access to the same ambitious curriculum, but then we do more for those that start with less. This takes the form of adaptive teaching in those successful colleges that I've been lucky enough to work with, as opposed to traditional differentiation. So let me just explain the differences I see. And it might be semantics, I'm sure it is, but it helps me to think in this way. Traditional differentiation tended to take the form of differentiating by task or by outcome. In other words, we give learners different tasks to do and we assess them in different ways. They will achieve different things. That, of course, might enable some learners to access the curriculum, but it just perpetuates, as I say, differences or disadvantages. Instead, adaptive teaching is about giving all students the same tasks to do and giving them access to that same curriculum, don't forget. But it's about acknowledging that some learners initially will need more or different types of support in order to access that ambitious curriculum. So it takes the form of scaffolding, in other words, those temporary structures that we put in place to help some learners to access the same task and the same curriculum as their peers. There's a whole host of different types of scaffolding that we might use here. There are verbal scaffolds, so the types of questions that we ask or the amount of cues and prompts that we give certain learners. There are written scaffolds like writing frames, stem sentences, and so on. And there are visual scaffolds as well, such as a writing frame or a worked example. Or we might make more use of dual coding and so on for some students. So it starts with equality. We have an ambitious curriculum that embodies excellence, and we teach that to all students. But then it moves towards equity in that we do more for those that start with less. We provide initial scaffolds, temporary scaffolds, for those that need more help accessing that ambitious curriculum. I'm going to emphasize that word temporary again, because what we don't want to do is perpetuate learned helplessness. What we want to do is help all learners to become increasingly independent over time. So it's not about doing the work for learners, but it's about providing some initial support and help so that they can do the work for themselves. So the scaffolds, the adaptations that we make should fade away over time. The third of my 10 top tips, if you like, of what works in the most successful FE colleges is this. We have planned an ambitious curriculum. We taught that ambitious curriculum to all learners, albeit with adaptations for those that need it initially. Then we make sure that our learners themselves know what that curriculum looks like. We share the bigger picture with learners so they know exactly the journey that they have begun. They know exactly what success, why that matters, and they know whereabouts they are on the journey. So we make that big picture. Now, it might not be we share the entire curriculum plan with them, a learner-friendly version of that curriculum, so they know exactly what they will be doing week on week, lesson on lesson, why that matters, how that fits in, and how that will be assessed at a later point. So they understand the journey, as I say, that they are on. And it's not just sharing the curriculum, what they will be learning, the knowledge, skills, and understanding that will be provided and why, the assessment process as well. So tip 4 is that students will know how and why they will be assessed. And crucial, entire learning will be activated and built upon. So alongside a learner-friendly big picture or curriculum plan is a detailed assessment schedule. So they know exactly what will be assessed, how it will be assessed, when it will be assessed, and how prior learning will be activated. Now, embedded in that, perhaps explicit in that, or implicit in that, but I would make it explicit, is the importance of retrieval practice, which I mentioned earlier in this session as well. So as a part of sharing that big picture, as a part of having a clear assessment schedule, is the planned opportunities for learners to engage in retrieval practice in order that they, as I say, prevent prior knowledge from decaying, so they just activate prior knowledge. So they, in other words, they retrieve it from long-term memory, bring it back into working memory, so that they can do something with it. They can think about it, process it. But it's not just about preventing decay, it's about building upon that prior knowledge and getting learners to add to and to apply that knowledge so that they can build ever more complex schemata or mental maps in long-term memory. So it's that spider's web of knowledge and skills that make up our subject or our vocation or field. It's sharing that with learners, and it's making it explicit so that they know how different parts of our curriculum talk to each other, build upon each other, are connected to each other. Tip 5 then of my top 10 tips for a successful FE classroom is that when we make use of whole class feedback. In other words, we don't spend lots of time, and I've seen the opposite of this, where lots of time is spent in lessons after an assessment, giving individual feedback to learners. Now, what tends to happen there, though of course one-to-one feedback is important where we can logistically make it work, what tends to happen in a lesson where individual learners are being given feedback is that every other learner is passive and are confused or stuck or waiting for the teacher to come to them to ask a question. So it's not an effective use of lesson time. Where I've seen this work really well is after an assessment, the teacher has used the outcomes of the assessment to give whole class feedback instead. In other words, they've used the assessment as a teaching tool, not just to give feedback, not just a line in the sand for learners, but actually as actionable next steps for all learners to follow so they can improve upon that assessment and make incremental progress. So it's used as a way to share the most common mistakes or to unpack the most common misconceptions that learners have. Now, on that point, we often know, I think, that when we set an assessment, certainly when we've taught something a number of times, we know where learners are likely to go wrong. We can predict, we can anticipate the misconceptions or the questions that learners will have. And I think if we can do that, we can also, before we mark individual learners' work, we can anticipate the most common items of feedback that are likely to be given. And we could do two things with that. One, we can use that as the whole class feedback. So we can almost anticipate what will happen next in the lesson, but we can also use that to make people see me. Well, I can see myself again. I seem to have lost you. I presume you also lost me. I'm just going to bring my slides back up and hope that that was just a temporary glitch in the system. Okay, thank you. A bit of confirmation in the chat that you can see me again, so hopefully you can see that slide. Apologies, don't know what happened there. I just kept talking to myself. I can talk to an empty room, it's fine. So the point I was making there, just as I lost you, was that because we can anticipate the kind of most common items of feedback on a piece of work that we set students to do, or a skills-based assessment, we can have a list of, let's say, 1 to 10 of the most common items of feedback we give to students. And we can use that as code marking instead of giving detailed comments to students. Okay, 6 then is that in the most successful colleges, in the most successful lessons, it's been clear that the teachers themselves have had excellent subject or industry knowledge, which is in part because they have the experience behind them. They've either worked in that field or they have the qualifications needed to have developed that subject knowledge. But the key to it was that they didn't just have subject knowledge, they had pedagogical content knowledge as well. That dual professionalism, knowing your stuff and knowing how to teach your stuff in a way that makes sense to learners. So it's in part what I said a moment ago about preempting misconceptions and questions and so on. It's knowing how to teach our topic, our subject in a logical order and in a way that talks to and makes sense to our learners. It's not enough just to have subject knowledge. We need to know how learners will engage with that and how best to teach that. What that then leads to, the advantage of that excellent subject knowledge is this, that the teachers who demonstrate that knowledge, that dual professionalism, have been able to use it to enthuse their students with clear and insightful explanations. Now, this is the start of a number of features of effective teaching. I tend to, when I talk to teaching colleagues about delivery, about implementation, I tend to share a 4-step teaching sequence. Now, I believe I shared this a few years ago at the in-person conference in Maidstone. So for those that attended that, this may be familiar. But for those who did not, or who have slept since then, just very briefly, whenever I introduce students to new information, I still teach, by the way, learners and teachers. When I introduce my learners to new information for the first time, I follow a 4-step sequence. It starts with telling, teacher explanations. So I front load with the knowledge, with the keywords, the ideas, the definitions, the concepts that learners need to acquire in order to be successful within this particular task or topic or unit, whatever it might be. So it starts with explanations. Then step 2 is showing, which is teacher modeling. Now, the key to modeling, we do that live in front of students. We don't show them an exemplar. We don't say, here's one I made earlier, or here's an example of excellence, because they might look at that and think, yes, that is indeed excellent, but I've no idea how to get from where I am to where that is. So the key to modeling is that we do it live in front of students. We show them how to do it, how to build it, how to write it, whatever it might be. And whilst we're doing that, we are thinking aloud. We are making explicit what we do implicitly as the expert in our field. We're making visible what we do invisibly. So we're explaining our thought processes. We are our decision-making processes, and we're also saying out loud our mistakes and how we're revising, from mistakes that we make, how we're redrafting or improving our work, or we're managing to respond to an error that we've made. So the first step is explanations, clear explanations, which make use of analogies and metaphors and so on, so that we can help students to understand new abstract information within the context of something familiar and concrete. So analogies are great to do that, as are metaphors. So it starts with explanations, then it's about modelling. We're showing students how to produce excellence live in front of them, and we're explaining our thinking as we go. The third step then is doing, which is about co-construction or joint construction of a model. So here we and learners continue to produce this model of excellence together. We still have a key part to play in this. Key questions of learners. We will pass the task between learners and get them to add to and comment on each other's work. We will drip feed in technical language perhaps, and we will keep learners on track with key questions and feedback. But the learners themselves will now start to contribute to the building of that model. So that's the third step. The fourth step then, I miscounted, that was 5. The fourth step is, good job, I'm an English teacher, not a maths teacher. The fourth step then is independent practice. Now, this is where each learner entirely by themselves will produce a model for themselves, or will continue to build upon the model that we've started together. It's important that we get to that point of independent practice so that learners can go through the cognitive processes involved from start to finish. Because if they haven't done it for themselves, if they've not engaged in the thinking for themselves, they're not as likely to encode that thinking and those ideas, and therefore not as likely to be able to do it by themselves at a later point. Now, the key to this 4-step sequence, it's fairly straightforward. I'm sure it's common sense. It's very much a I do, we do, you do approach. But the key to it is that it slowly hands control over to learners. So it starts with the highest level of teacher input. We are the arbiters of our subject or vocational knowledge. We should be in control of the flow of information. Then over time, we hand control over to our students. So they are more able to do this work independently. So going back to my top tips then, that's at the heart of this point here. In the most successful lessons that I've been able to, and lucky enough to observe, the teachers have used their knowledge, their subject and their pedagogical content knowledge in order to give really insightful, clear explanations, and then to model excellence and think aloud in front of students. Tip 7 is, and it's linked to that sequence, I suppose, but in the most successful colleges, what I've been able to see is teachers using questioning really effectively. Questioning in order to engage students as active participants in the process of learning. And also to give ongoing formative feedback to students. So you've got two types of questions, put simply. You've got those open sort of dialogic questions, like Socratic questioning, that's used in order to deepen students' thinking, to engage them, to enthuse them, to get them thinking, and to get them more towards critical thinking as well. But then you've got more closed questions, which are used as a means of assessment and of giving feedback, multiple choice quizzes, hinge questions, and so on. But questioning has been at the heart of these teachers' practice. And in fact, I think it was Socrates that said that questioning is the only defensible form of teaching, that we teach through good questions, big questions. Now, having said that, variety is the spice of life, of course. And so I also think that in the most successful lessons, there has been, over the course of a sequence of lessons, a variety of learning activities. It perhaps starts with direct instruction, with teacher explanations and modelling. Then with that co-construction, working together on a model, and then with independent practice. But over time, there have been a number of activities that have engaged students. Now, that might be chunking. So we have different activities that slowly lead towards learners taking more control, more ownership of learning and becoming more independent. But that variety has led to students being more attentive because, yeah, we all need variety. If the lesson was exactly the same structure, and was always more passive for learners, then of course they're going to switch off and be demotivated and perhaps not be as attentive and not learn. So we all need variety. But it's not just about maintaining our learners' attention, it's aiding the retention of information as well. So there has been a variety of learning activities that have aided students' retention of information and helped to retain their attention. Tip 9 is that students in these lessons, in the most successful colleges that I've worked with and in the most effective lessons, have been stretched and challenged. Not just the most able, not just the highest performing, but all learners have been stretched and challenged. What that often looks like is perhaps the opposite of traditional stretch and challenge. So perhaps traditionally, like traditional differentiation was about giving students different tasks to do, traditional stretch and challenge was about identifying the most able students and giving them extension activities, allowing them to go on and move on further, knowledge and skills further. But what that tends to do is it makes our lessons quite problematic because we're losing the integrity of the sequencing that we have planned. We've got learners at completely different points of their journey, and it's quite hard to manage that. And what tends to happen is that the so-called less able or the lower performing students then just flounder and they perhaps go backwards. And again, we perpetuate or widening the existing differences between them. So instead, all learners in these successful lessons are stretched and challenged. Now, in practice, that might take the form of peer teaching. So we teach students something, then we assess them, and we see who's got it and who hasn't. Obviously, this is a simple illustration, but go with me. So we assess students. Some students have got it, some students have not. Now, instead of allowing those that have got it to move on to the next thing and therefore lose the integrity of our planned and sequenced curriculum, we allow those that have got it to peer teach or peer coach or mentor those that have not. We're maintaining the integrity of our sequence, and every learner is engaged in something meaningful. Those that haven't yet got it are being retaught it, but by someone else and in student-friendly language. Those that have got it, because they're having to explain it to somebody else, are their understanding of that idea, that concept. And so they are also moving forwards. They are learning as well. It's a meaningful use of everybody's time. So we maintain integrity of our sequencing, but we make sure that all students are stretched and challenged. Now, that stretch and challenge might take as well. So we might use adaptive strategies, scaffolds for some, but not without the scaffolds are stretched. Or we might give them give some students a worked example, so partially completed example where there's those who are slightly ahead might get the blank version without those cues, without those prompts, so that they're expected to do more, but they're still completing the same task. It might be that the stretch and challenge isn't just about their subject knowledge, but it's about the development of their wider skills as well. So it's not just about stretching them within our subject content, but it's about helping them to develop knowledge and skills beyond that qualification, making sure they're fully prepared for what comes next. So they're developing those wider skills, those character skills, resilience, determination, team building, and so on. And that challenge is there not just in terms of the pace and the pitch of our lessons, but also in the feedback that's given. So we make sure that the feedback that we give learners is challenging. Perhaps it's kind of baby step, small step feedback. It's actionable steps to take, but that it challenges them to move on, to improve by increments. So we don't just give positive praise to students, or we don't just think, well, these students are struggling and therefore I will just give them something positive to motivate them. We give them challenging feedback and help them to, in some cases, exceed the targets that have been set for them. So we make sure we use feedback as a way to really stretch and challenge students to help them to move on and to access more difficult content. And then this is perhaps the hardest part to achieve in many ways. It's certainly much less tangible, not something we can plan. 10th and final tip for effective teaching that I've been able to discern from, as I say, observing a number of hundreds of colleagues in God knows how many colleges, is this: that in those most successful lessons, teachers had a warmth towards students. It's been clear that they have known their learners. First of all, it starts there with knowledge. They have known their learners and they have cared about their learners' success. Rewarded tenfold by students who then are loyal and work hard for those staff who seemingly care about them and want them to succeed. Now, I say it's intangible, but of course, it can be tangible. It can be the actions and the language that we use day in, day out that leads to that sense of warmth and care. So it is in part about challenging feedback. It is in part about making sure that we give all students the same tasks to do and we expect excellence of them. We don't settle for second best. It is about making sure that when we do adapt our teaching to support those that need it initially, that the scaffolds fall away quickly. Learners are challenged to become independent. So although warmth is something intangible and abstract, it's in the daily activities, the daily actions, the language that we use that shows our learners that we have high expectations of them and we expect them to achieve. Just to give a quick aside, and that's the Pygmalion effect, which I'm sure you're familiar with, but if not, the Pygmalion effect is that the notion that having high expectations of students is not just something that's nice to do, but it leads to demonstrably improved outcomes for students. If we have high expectations of them, we will give them high to do, and we will challenge them to improve by increments. We will give them more challenging feedback to act upon and push them to do their very best. And they will raise their game. They will improve as a consequence of that. The opposite of the Pygmalion effect is the Gollum effect. The Gollum effect is the notion that if you have low expectations of students, their performance will become worse. They will perform less well. And they will probably develop low expectations of themselves and what they can achieve as well. So we stick with high expectations of all students. Sometimes that's about ignoring prior data, ignoring the targets that have been set and expecting all of our students to achieve their very best. Of course, they won't all achieve the top marks, the top grades in our subject or vocation. But if we don't set them on a path towards that, if we don't give them the opportunity to achieve their very best, then we can be sure they will not. Those are my top 10 tips for effective teaching. As I say, it's not a checklist. It's not something that I would advocate that you tick off one by one, but it is just a way of sharing with you what I've been able to gather from working with lots and lots of colleges and seeing lots of fantastic FE teachers working in their classrooms. And I hope it was useful, but it does come with the caveat, and I did say it earlier in another form, but there is no blueprint. There is no one way of teaching. What works with one teacher and one class at one point in time, as I said at the start, might not work with another teacher and another class at another point in time. What works with one subject or vocation might not work with another. Context is, I know, vital. But in the most successful lessons, I think this is always true. The teachers are sensitive to the needs of their students, and they adapt to the here and now circumstances of their classrooms or their workshops, their labs, their sports fields, their workplace. They are attuned, in other words, to what's happening in front of them. They know if the pace is too fast or slow. They know if the pitch is too high or low, and they adjust. So it's not about sticking slavishly to a plan, though we do need a good, sequenced, ambitious plan in place. We don't stick to it slavishly. We are attuned to what's, and we are willing to adapt in of evidence. I am conscious of time, so what I'm going to do is, in a moment, I'm going to stop talking and open up to questions, but I just want to signpost you to the slides, which I will make available after this session. You'll find there's a few slides that I've not had the time to cover today, including on adaptive teaching, which I have talked about, but I've added a few more specific slides in there, including about those different types of scaffolds that we might use. And I've also included a little bit more information, for example, the 4-step teaching sequence that I mentioned, as well as some tips on how to explicitly teach metacognition, which I covered earlier, and another way of making sure we don't perpetuate learned helplessness, but we help students to become more independent. When you have a look at those slides, if you have any questions for me or any comments at all, then please do get in contact with me. You'll see now on screen my contact details. You can contact me through the website, and incidentally, you'll find a lot more information on everything that I've covered today on the website, all free of charge. So that is bromleyeducation.co.uk. Do have a look there if you want to know more or if you want to contact me. Or you can contact me on email, admin@bromleyeducation.co.uk, or you can follow me and contact me through Twitter @MJ_Bromley. Apologies, I've covered a space of time, so I did speak very quickly. I hope it was useful. I hope it made sense. I've been shouting over the banging. I hope that wasn't disturbing to you, but it was slightly to me, hence me losing my train of thought a number of times. But anyway, I'm going to just thank you and hand over to Bev for any questions that you have posted through the course of this session. Thank you.
Hi, Matt. Yes, we do have a few questions. One of them is from Lance. He said, great messages, Matt. How explicit are colleges in prescribing these principles in a framework for teachers?
Yeah, it's a good question. And the answer is, it depends. Some colleges are and have a very similar, have a framework. Particularly, I know some have certainly adapted the frameworks that I shared at the beginning as a way of thinking about planning, teaching, and assessment. Others less so. If you want to know what I would advise, colleges do different things, and it depends on context, depends on what works, depends on the leadership team and their own views, of course. But if you want to know what I think works, it is a balance between the two. I think there should be consistency. We know, for example, that if we have more consistency in the way that we set out our lessons, in the structures that we follow, in where we have key information, in the types of information that we share and how it's shared and so on, then we're going to reduce the extraneous load that's placed on our learners' working memory. Because at all times, our working memory is very small, it's very limited, and there's lots of competing demands on it. And some of that is to try and understand the instructional context, to understand how we're being taught and how the classroom or the learning environment is set up. So the more we can achieve consistency there across a college and across lessons, the less extraneous load they will be placed on learners' working memory, and therefore the more working memory capacity learners will have access to process the information we need them to learn. So consistency is key in some things, but it's a balance, I think, between consistency and context, knowing what works within our own lessons and our own students. So I'll give you one specific example of what I mean by that balance. I have come to discern, I'm not a dictator by any means, I've always believed in professional autonomy, but I've come to discern that every lesson should have a form of retrieval practice in it. I've yet to see counter evidence. I've seen so much evidence that the retrieval practice is so impactful. So I think every lesson should have some form of retrieval practice in it. And so if I were now leading a college, I would dictate that I would expect to see in every lesson some form of retrieval practice. But what that looks like and when it happens is absolutely down to an individual teacher. It might be that at the start of the lesson, there is a multiple choice quiz on what was learnt the previous lesson and lessons before that. It might be that within the lesson, there is the use of hinge questions, or at the end, exit tickets, or peer feedback, or whatever it might be. It could take many different forms and happen at any point in a lesson. So there is that professional autonomy, there is that individual decision-making based on context, but there's also a rough framework to achieve consistency. So I would advise that that's probably the balance to be struck. There should be a framework to follow. There should be a process for everyone to follow in terms of their planning, but there should also be that flexibility for individual teachers to be able to deliver that in a way that they know works for them and for their learners and for the subject or vocation that they're teaching.
Thank you so much, Matt. I think we're just about run out of time, and we're now ready for the next part of the event. Matt, there are a few questions still on the Q&A, so maybe you'd like to answer them in the chat, or we can send them to you later on. And for the people that are listening in, you have the Matt's contact details, and you can just ask him the question directly, I guess. So yeah, thank you so much, Matt. And now we'll hand over to Vikki for her session. For those that want to transfer to the left hall or the right hall, the left hall will have Andrew Dowell and Gemma Baker. So just click on event map on the top, and you can just move to the session that you would like to attend. So Vikki, over to you now. Oh, you're muted at the moment, Vikki.
Thank you very much, and apologies. I made sure that I shared my screen in time, and I put my background on my video. And what did I forget? The mic. Okay, so I'm delighted to be with you today, and I'm going to talk to you in this session about giving you an overview of the ETF Enhanced Digital Teaching Platform, especially the EdTech CPD program. And that's going to be fairly short. It's mainly an introduction on the possibilities for a professional development that you have. And then I'll give you an introduction to the education opportunities brought by extended realities. Now, the Education and Training Foundation, we are the expert body for professional development and standards in the further education and training sector in England. Now, the aim of the session, I've already mentioned. There will be 3 takeaways. First of all, it is about considering the EdTech professional development opportunities offered by ETF to teachers, trainers, and managers. Then you'll be able to differentiate augmented, virtual, mixed realities, and then hopefully assess the pedagogical contributions of virtual reality to your teaching area. Now, Bev, could you share in the chat, otherwise I will, the link to our Padlet? I've just noticed that my screen is not moving.
The link is now on the chat, Vikki, and we can only see the browser Jamboard. We can see the Jamboard on your screen.
Okay, so we should be here. Sorry about that. Let me move back. So this is a plan for the session. And first of all, we're going to give you the overview, then XR and education, and then we'll have a conclusion and time for Q&A. So I believe that you've now shared the link to our Padlet. From the Padlet, you'll have the link to all the resources that we're using in this session, including the presentation, slide deck, and the Jamboard. So let's go into the EdTech. So we've got a platform for EdTech and digital skills at the ETF, and it's the Enhanced Digital Teaching Platform. And as you can see, I'm really proud to say that we've won 2 years in a row the EdTech 50 Award for the UK, recognizing that the Enhanced Digital Teaching Platform is one of the best products in the UK. And it hosts 2 main programs, one which is about EdTech, how to enhance digital, how to enhance teaching, learning and assessment with technologies, and the other one is about essential digital skills. And then in the back end, you can see that we've got a management dashboard aimed at providers. But the EdTech program is what we're going to talk to you about essentially, and it is underpinned by the Digital Teaching Professional Framework. As you can see, it's got 7 key competencies, A to G, and they are aligned or structured to the teacher's journey. However, it's not meant to be approached in a linear manner. It's very much an aspirational framework that you deep in as and when you need it. It was a collaboration with JISC, and you can see there are 3 stages of performance. The first one is exploring, aimed at those of us who don't know anything about EdTech. The other one is adopting, most of us probably, using EdTech as and when we can and know how to. And leading is for those of us who are supporting others and able to critique what EdTech may be most suited for a given learning practice. Now, the EdTech is a set of 175 micro-learning modules. And I say micro because they're 5 minutes each. And we've built gamification to really reward your commitment to your self-development. And it's meant to respond to our immediacy mindset, because we believe that all of us now have a butterfly approach to learning, moving across resources as and when we need it. Now we've got a guide on how to use the platform and the program, and you can see with that guide on how to move. But besides the immediacy mindset, you can very well decide to move across it, across all of the 7 competencies within one stage of performance. For instance, we've got a guide which is aimed at teacher starter in EdTech, and we've identified 12 modules of 5 minutes each, so 1 hour CPD training, to really help you focus on getting started. The second way to move across is through a vertical way. So for instance, if you go to competency F, and you will be able to see in the competency F accessibility, you can move from exploring to adopting to leading stages. And we've got 11 modules in accessibility. And then finally, you can move across it in a kind of snake and ladder model with progressing by theme. And we've got a total of 7 themes. And you'll see here, for instance, this theme on the knowledge agenda. And I believe that Matt has just mentioned the knowledge agenda, cognitive load, dual coding, and so on. That would be applied in that particular guide. Otherwise, collaborations being another one. We've built badging and to recognize your progress. And from an organization viewpoint, the badging process really enables organizations to track CPD and provide localized support so that you can upskill workforce. It really supports changes in curriculum delivery planning for and increased learning offered online. In the backend of everything we do on the enhanced platform, we've built a reflection. Why? Because we know that training can be very enjoyable. However, if it's not embedded in our practice, if it doesn't change the way we deliver, it is meaningless. And therefore, it's really important to reflect on that 5 minutes bit of training and see how we can apply it 100% within our practice. And once we've created GTech Swap, it's a wall where you can share your practice and discuss with colleagues what it is that you've done to apply the training, what worked and why, and what didn't work, and how you're planning on solving it next, and what it is the next step that you're thinking about implementing with perhaps different groups. And this can really lead to the co-construction of knowledge and practice. We've built social media functionalities, and because we believe that the community really creates a social framework for learning, and you can follow practitioners, you can like, you can bookmark and comment. And as I said, in the back end of it, we've got a management dashboard, and we've got free subscription until the 15th of July. And from beginning of August next academic year, we will be charging a subscription fee. Now, if I go, you will be able to see here the enhanced digital teaching platform, and you can see that straight away you've got an introduction, an induction on how to navigate, and an introduction on the various programs on there. You've got a transcript available and our accessibility statement. And we've built very strong accessibility and inclusion ethos. And everything we do on the Enhance is fully inclusive and meeting the new regulations. I've mentioned the program. You can see here that if you scroll down, you're going to have the most popular tech modules and essential digital skills modules as well. And then if you log in, and you can see here, I am not yet logged in, then you will be able to see other elements. So when I'm logged in, this is a management dashboard, and you can see here that you will be able to have access to all kinds of reports on activities within your organization. Obviously, practitioners need to agree to share their data. You don't need to subscribe to Enhance. You can access our EdTech program automatically and without subscribing or logging in or signing up. And this is the interactive version of the digital teaching professional framework. And you can see here some of the modules that you can access. If you wanted to access just all the modules at leading stages, then you would click on leading, and those leading modules you would be able to access. And that gives you an idea of how to navigate across it. Then the narrative progression pathways by theme, you can see them here. And if I go into collaborative working, for instance, which I've mentioned, then you can see the modules that will give you. So there's always an introduction. Then you've got the modules collaborating between teachers, collaborating between, teachers and learners, and finally collaborating, encouraging collaborations between learners. And then, as I've mentioned, we've got a reflection activity in the back end. Okay, so let me go back to my presentation. Now I'm going to talk to you. I've noticed that we're late, so I'll take the questions at the end, but feel free to add them to the chat right now. Okay, so XR education, or extended realities education. Well, extended reality is not new. technology per se, and versions of it have been used since the 1960s. But it is a tool that is going through a radical evolution. And some of the biggest leaps are in particular in transforming the gaming and entertainment industry. However, there have been some incredible advances in technologies across the field with some really, really exciting new possibilities. And from an education designer's perspective, the opportunity for future extended reality interactions have just begun. And simply said, really, VR has the ability to fundamentally change the way we experience the world and education. Before we move on, it's important for us to really define what are extended realities. So for this activity, I would like you to move to our Jamboard. So if I go to the Jamboard, here we go. I suppose you have the link to the Jamboard. So we're going to move to slide 7. So you move to the top here. And this is our slide. And what you need to take is that little sticky note. Can you see? So if I take my sticky note, here we go. I'm going to be able to say XR is ... And I can write a kind of definition that I think is XR. And then you can move it in the right sort of fields. I understand quite a few of you are going to be joining, so feel free to, so I'll just delete this and just go into the sticky note here on the left-hand side and start adding your definitions. I'm going to add 3 minutes to this activity. So you can get started. Do you know the differences between extended, augmented, virtual, or mixed realities? Just add a sticker, pick up a sticky note, and add AR is. I can only see 4 of you joining in the Jamboard. A lot of activities on the Jamboard in this session. So please do make sure that you join in. Otherwise, you are going to miss out. The link is in the chat. Yay, thank you very much. So I'm a bit short-sighted. I'll make it a little bit bigger so I can actually read it. That's one of the beauty of technologies, a way of contextualizing reality in the classroom. Okay, good. Anybody else? What is virtual reality? Mixed realities, maybe not so well known. Virtual realities, maybe a bit better. Or augmented. Yes, well done. Extended realities, yes. It is a sort of capturing all type of realities. And that's why I've titled this presentation Extended Realities. A version of the real world. I would need to develop this. It's augmented, an augmentation of the real world. So how could you augment the real world? What do you need to add to augment the real world? Yeah, VR, total immersion, indeed. So you're not in VR, you're not anymore in the real world, you're immersed into a digital world, a virtual world. That can be a simulation of a real world, but nevertheless, you are in a secure environment. Okay, I think it's nearly time. Let me have a look at my timing. 13, 12 seconds left. Anybody else want to add anything? Okay. Yes, VR computers generated. Okay, thank you very much for that. So let's go back to our presentation, and you can see here the definitions for the XR definition. So as you said, the extended realities is a capsule term for technologies that enhance or replace our view of the world. Augmented is adding a layer on top of our world. So we'll see how this is going to work in a minute. Then virtual reality takes us away from the reality and move into a simulated world and immerse us. And there's all kinds of ways of immersing of virtual realities. That can be immersive rooms, 360-degree videos, and as well as virtual reality. And mixed realities is a bit in between augmented and virtual realities. So let's have a look at this first video.
Hi, Vikki. I think the video is buffering from your end. I can play it for you if you want, so that the audience can see it clear.
Yeah, it's not working.
It's buffering. It's a bit. It's
Okay,
a bit,
do you want to play it instead?
All right. Okay. So I'll play it in here. If you could pause your screen, please.
So I stop sharing.
Yes, please.
Thank you very much, and apologies. I believe that the video was buffering, so Bev will actually show all the videos rather than me, so to help. So there is no doubt that augmented reality, and you've seen some examples of mixed realities as well, has an incredible potential in transforming our lives at home, shopping experience, cooking, entertainment, and even translation. And that's really useful if you like traveling, or even directions. And we know how having GPS can really make a difference when we're traveling already. But what are the main barriers to augmented, virtual, and mixed realities? So let's go back to our Jamboard. And on the Jamboard, we're going to go into, oh, no, you don't want to see that yet. On the Jamboard, we're going to the next place. Yeah, well done. Lack of technical infrastructure, definitely. You will need good technical access and infrastructure. What else do you need? What are the barriers for you as educators? Can you make XR? Do you know where to access XR? So just pick up a sticky note, lack of money. And I think it is something that Ewart actually mentioned early on as well, the fact that FE is underfunded. And yes, we can make a difference, but we do need that money, don't we? No working internet. Okay. Lack of money, yeah. Quality training, yeah. You need to know how to access that quality training, and so that you can share and use with our learners. Excellent. Now, I was going to give you 3 minutes for this activity. I forgot to turn it on, so I'll just put a quick 2 minutes. Keep going, mindset. Yeah, it's not easy to challenge ourselves using new technologies, but then it's so fun. Using new technologies is very much like riding a bike. Do you remember when you learned to ride a bicycle? You know, initially you were very shaky and you fell, and you needed that kind of support. And then once you got your balance, it was really fun, fast, and rewarding. That's very much a say. So it's a legacy, lack of digital skills, of course, lack of time, and definitely time is a major barrier to engagement. Okay, I'm going to move. Oh, well done. Incredibly wide field navigation. It's not easy, is it? Mindset. Oh, this one is a really long one, so thank you for. Let's enlarge it a little bit. Relies on constant and reliable network. Virtual reality can be done without access to a network. It can be a part of the goggles, and everything can be included in that. And some providers will actually support that. Okay, 27. I'm moving on. So I'm going back to my presentation, and I think you've summed fairly well the barriers, and you've got some which are identified on this slide, which is by Ian. And there are 3 significant problems according to them: the lack of good, relevant content already existing, lack of easy way to create new content, and lack of good use cases that prove the value of return on investment. But really, what they don't mention, and that's something you have mentioned, is the price tag added to it. And implementing VR is tough, and not only in terms of cost, but access to technology and the skills that you need and the time that you need to be able to develop contextualized content that is relevant to you. So we're going to move to our next video. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to let let me stop that. It's hidden. Where is it? So I'm going to let Beverly finish the video. Thank you very much. So now you've seen some ways of embedding technologies within the vocational and industry. And when would you use extended realities technologies and within your curriculum area? And when would it be most effective? What kind of situations or simulations or activities which you think would be it would be best to use extended realities solutions, keeping in mind that technology serves pedagogical approaches and learning, and rather than just being a gimmick. So let's go to our Jamboard. And on the Jamboard, wow, look at all these barriers. I'll go back into it. So next set is effective learning. When do you think it's going to be best to actually, oh, what did I do? Here we go, cancel. Well, I've done a terrible mistake. I think I've enlarged it massively. So just keep posting. Don't worry, I'll find a way. I need to find the edge of it. In fact, I'm going to create just a new slide here. So go to the next slide.
So everybody, just bear with us whilst we try to get Vikki back. Best will in the world. Yes, I think we need to shovel some more coal into our our slightly creaking UK digital system so we can get it back. So do bear with us whilst my colleagues from Digital Leaders try to resolve the glitch. I think Vikki made the crucial mistake of pressing a different button maybe, and yeah, as we know, anyway, do bear with us, and we may have just a slight intermission, as they said in the old days.
Hi, Vikki, you're back.
Yeah, I'm back. I'm really sorry about that.
I think your internet might be a bit low. It's buffering quite a lot. So you can maybe continue the presentation with your camera off, and we can keep the audio.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So as Bev said, I'm keeping my camera off because apparently I'm buffering quite a bit. So really sorry about that. I'll share my screen. And I can't see my content. Let me have a look. Here we go. I'm back on. Just as well, really. Here we go. Okay, so you're adding, well done, and we're going to keep moving because I've created some delays, trying an activity a few times before doing it in real. Yeah, and that's definitely one very good one, because obviously some more challenging perhaps activities can be, or for health and safety, for instance, it's a good place to get started. Okay. So I'm going to move on and show you my next slide, which is really about the fact that virtual technologies, VR, can enable more effective learning, and at a lower cost if you think about it in terms of repetition, and in less time than many traditional learning methods. And this is because VR can allow more training repetitions as needed by the learner, and can be really personalized as well, especially when dealing with costly, rare, or dangerous environments. And you can see here some good sort of examples of activities that could be very useful. Now, another way of for you to make decisions whether to use VR or not is this decision framework for VR by Deloitte Insights, and it can really help us decide whether we should use VR or not. And there are two axes that you can see: what the learners need to do within the knowledge, with this knowledge, and whether the knowledge is just simple or complex. So it's whether it is easy to replicate or physically impossible to recreate that simulation or that environment, whether it's easy or obvious to observe or impossible to observe or experience directly, and whether it's a common or rare occurrence. And our next video is very much going to be, and I'm not going to play it, I'm going to let Bev play it, and it's very much showing us medtech and how extended realities can make a real difference to medicine and education in medicine. So Bev, I'll let you share. Thank you very much. So you can see in the video how technologies can really transform learning experiences of learners. So I'm going to reshare my screen for the next stage of my presentation. Here we go. And there are several cognitive development which are associated to VR, XR, and AR. And those are really important. And according to Focus XR, which was delivered as part of the Blended Learning Consortium webinar very recently, learning immersively really promotes cognitive development, and VR has the ability to rewire the brain to enhance neural connections needed for learning and memory. And the fact that we immerse ourselves into a new environment, or we've got that augmented reality or mixed reality, means that we are experiencing it through a range of senses, including haptics, and that makes a real difference to the way it sticks to our long-term memory. So the next steps is about the statistics in terms of return on investment. And you can see some statistics here that have been collected by PwC, and it's a slide from Catapult Digital. It was a webinar I attended fairly recently as well. When learning immersively, the brain, according to some research, say that we have a 75% learning retention rate, which is higher than most other forms of training. Compared to lectures and readings, it's literally, for lecture and readings, it's only 5 to 10% retention rate. So you can really see here that it's making a real difference. So we're going to watch another video. I'm conscious of time, so we need to move. We need to move fast. Beverly, I'll stop sharing. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again. Oh, cancel. Share. Here we go. So you can really see how body swaps, so for soft skills, how it can be really useful to practice interview skills, or whether it is about mentoring or coaching. There's all kinds of ways where you can actually use virtual reality to rehearse decision making and so on. Now, we're going to think about how you can, so we're going to reflect. And in terms of reflection, when we think of technology, curiosity is really important, and query, it leads to new approaches to learning design through technology. So we've been used to doing role plays in the classroom. Is it the most effective way to actually help learners, and perhaps using virtual? So we're going to give you now 8 minutes to go onto the Padlet and look at how you can identify 2 areas of your current teaching program where virtual reality solutions might be valuable for one or more of the following reasons. And you've got them on the slide in bold, and those are on the Padlet. So you should have the link to the Padlet. You'll just need to add a plus. So if I go on the Padlet itself, you just need to add a plus here to add a post, and you've got 3 columns. It would enable your learners to develop practice and refine real-world skills that they cannot easily work on in real life. It would expose learners to understanding important emotional response or issues within their vocational field or academic area, and it would provide insight and understanding of abstract ideas and concept of unseeable artifacts and events. So I'm conscious, I said 8 minutes, I'm actually going to give you a bit less. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to come up with at least one idea of learning activities that would lend itself really well to be performed in extended realities for B, C, or D reasons. So please log on to the Padlet. I don't think some of you are coming up. Well done. So go to the Padlet. You've got the link. I can put it back in the chat. Let me get it. But you've got the name as well. I'll add it to the chat in here. Here we go. This is a Padlet link, and you'll have, it's in the chat. So please go to the Padlet. We've got 5 minutes. And we've got 4 minutes left. Thanks. I can see some of you are coming up. Aerospace, satellite communications, and robotic engineering. Yeah, it can be helpful, definitely. And you can add a like, you can click and like and add a like. So keep going. It's going to really help you focus and help you and lead to co-construction of knowledge and practice. By giving each other's example, you can also comment on each other's. So it gives you a sort of social framework for learning, which is based on your willingness to share ideas and experiment with things. It can be just 1 or 2 words. VR scenarios in an A&E, emergency room or hospital. Yes, accident and emergencies, definitely. Yeah, experiencing different workplace would give a good insight to learners. Going to a fish market, if you're working in travel, business and travel, then it gives you the opportunity for learners to experience a different country, a different culture as well, and not just a workplace. So it's a good way to travel and remain in a cheap way, I should say. Creative writing prompts, yes. Anybody else? Oh, I can see that this. So you can navigate through by moving up. Dementia, yeah, definitely. And it's virtual reality is used a lot to help individuals with phobia, for instance, and address anxieties and experience dementia. Definitely, mental health is a very strong area of use. Scenes from literature, yeah, and you can, for instance, experience the world of Anne Frank. This has been developed already, and those can be off-the-shelf products that you can purchase. Psychology A level, yeah. So try to be more specific. Psychology A level inside the body of the mind. Okay, yeah, that's good. Keep going. Cultural capital, yeah. Excellent. Okay. Okay, so we're going to move on. Here we go. And we're going to move. So thank you very much for sharing those. One thing which is really important is that we've developed an education and VR Wakelet. So if you're not familiar with the Wakelet, then it's a good way to share resources amongst learners. And that's a good way to collaborate virtually with learners. So you've got access to this Wakelet through the Padlet. And you can see if you scroll down here, you'll have the Jamboard, our presentation slides, as well as the DTPF, the VR in education, and various micro-learning modules dedicated to VR and AR. So let me move to our conclusion, because I'm conscious of time and I really want to hopefully have time to give you a few questions. So in this session, so if we do a quick recap, we've introduced the enhanced digital teaching platform, and that has been designed really to remove barriers to professional development of educators, and is an ideal starting point to optimize your professional development. We've also mentioned the two hosted program, EdTech and Essential Digital Skills, and dipped very, very quickly into our EdTech program and the DTPF Digital Teaching Professional Framework that underpins the 175 micro-learning modules. We've also explained how critical reflection plays a key part in our CPD approach. And then, of course, we've mentioned the management dashboard. And then we moved into differentiating the extended realities, virtual, augmented, and mixed, and looked at various potential applications. And we finally encouraged you to assess the pedagogical contributions of virtual reality in your area of teaching. And if there is 3 takeaways, the first one was about EdTech professional development opportunities for you to consider, differentiating augmented, virtual, and mixed realities, and assessing the pedagogical contributions of virtual reality to your area of teaching. And if there is one thing I would encourage you as 21st century citizens is to build a growth mindset. And from an organization perspective, it is very much about fostering curiosity, lifelong learning, while making sure that the processes and structures and infrastructure and access to technology within the organization support the delivery of the ethos. Thank you very much. And these are my contact details. So I'll take questions now and stop sharing.
Hi, that's fantastic, Vikki. Huge thank you for that. I think you're very brave testing the capability of this platform to support sharing your screen, and particularly the more interactive tools you shared on the screen during the presentation. But I think it pretty much worked very well. What was quite useful, it obviously reduces the number of questions you tend to get at the end. And I'm a bit conscious we are pushed for time, but I've got one specific question that has come up, and that's how would you encourage educators who are hesitant or resistant about using technology, specifically XR technologies, to support their teaching and learning environments?
Okay, so CPD is essential, so give them time and develop at their pace. We've built micro-learning modules of 5 minutes on the EdTech program of the ETF, because we believe that 5 minutes is enough to get ideas of the world of the possible and develop the skills. And it's really important for us to do it one step at a time, all of us. Now, in terms of virtual reality and augmented reality, it's about trying it. If you try it, then you can see how it could actually make a difference in engaging learners. And to try that, it is an organizational sort of move forward, a strategic move, and we can help. So, GTF is there to help FE providers in supporting them to develop digital capabilities and insight on how you can drive change, curriculum change. So use us.
Yes, thank you very much. I think I'm sure many people will. I think you covered quite a huge amount in there. There was obviously a lot around resistance, clearly, from different types of staff moving into the space who might be less comfortable with it. I think for me, what we will do anyway is because we are short of time for questions and your responses, is that I will collate any further questions that come up and email those to you. And when you get some time, if you are happy to provide us with some responses to those questions, we will then add them to our KFE Teaching, Learning Resources section of our website post event, which will obviously, because it's half term next week, will be after half term. So we basically put all the links, slides, short videos of what's been presented onto our site post event, which would usually be about a week after, if that's okay with you, Vikki. But huge thank you. It was absolutely brilliant.
Thank you.
I will let you get on with the rest of your day now. You can take a breather because that's quite intensive session. Just so that all of our colleagues that are attending know, if you wish to see Alison Whittle from City and Guilds talking about T-levels, stay put, stay here. There she is, magically appearing. I'll introduce you formally in a moment. If you want to see Teresa Frith from AOC, she'll be talking about the new Apprenticeship Workforce Development Programme, which I think will be of interest clearly to many of our work-based learning colleagues, etc. She is across in the left-hand hall, and in the right-hand hall are our colleagues from NHS Kent and Medway, Wayne Wilson, Nathan Pascal-Smith, who will be giving you a bit of a whistle-stop around the developments with the Health and Care Academy and other digitally related developments, particularly that they've been working on with KFE. So, as I'm staying here supporting Alison in the background, I will let Alison crack on. This is a slightly shorter session, so it's more, will all be contained within the half hour, so I won't take up any more of her time. But Alison is here from City and Guilds. I will let you steam right ahead if you're ready. Mike.
Can you hear me all right?
I can now. I've done that
Brilliant,
already.
thank you. I've made a rookie mistake again there, haven't I, putting those on? I'm just going to share my screen, if I may, and then I'm going to come off camera. But first of all, I'd just like to say hello and hello to everybody, and thank you very much for inviting me here today. My name is Alison Whittle. I'm the Post-16 Technical Advisor at City and Guilds, and my remit is everything Post-16. So as you can imagine, it's quite a busy space at the moment. That involves technical qualifications, T-levels. I'm responsible for higher education, engagement, stakeholder engagement, and identifying progression routes from non-academic qualifications into higher education. For this session, though, the focus will be on T-level. So I'm going to have a go at sharing. I'm going to come off camera to save some of the bandwidth and see if I'm going to be able to share. So, entire screen, it's not letting me share it. I did, hang on, we can, I think. Let me have a look. Right, it looks pretty okay there. Is this okay at all, Mark? And everybody hear that and hear me and see the screen?
Yes, we can see.
Fantastic, I can move it along then. My session really is trying to explain where T-levels came from. You know, what was the thinking behind them, which is the T in T-levels, a little bit about the sectors that we work in and that we offer, and really some of the developments and approaches to teaching and learning that we've had to adapt and change as an awarding organisation, really. So I'm going to give you a very brief overview of each T-level and hopefully some hints and tips, and I'm hoping to leave plenty of time for questions at the end there. So you've probably all seen a similar model version of the T-shaped learning and development model, and this really is the model that T-levels have been based on. So T-level sort of T-shaped skills really refer to a special type of quality or qualities that make an employee valuable. For example, the individual should possess an excellent knowledge and skills in specific areas and be good at working with others in a collaborative way. And this is really sort of a breakdown of it. So those transferable professional skills refer to those skills that are required and expected by employers. And these skills, such as employability, embedded maths, English and digital skills, and all of those types of skills, really, and having an understanding of the sector and the industry that they're working within. So these skills are taught in the core component of the T-level, and they are assessed in the core component of the T-level. So if we move on to the next bit, these are the transferable personal skills. And these are the qualities, really, and core skills that make a person employable. And these are taught and assessed in the employer set project part of the T-level. And they are all based on a set number of tasks, things like critical thinking, collaborative working, problem solving, teamwork, all the typical skills that an employer would expect an employee to actually have when they've finished a T-level. Now, the technical knowledge and skills are taught within that's in the blue area, the dark blue area down. And they are taught in the occupational specialism of the T-level. And they focus on a main area where learners will specialise in a particular subject. So in other words, the occupational specialism. So these technical skills are assessed by subject knowledge and application of practical skills, which is in the occupational specialism part of the T-level. And of course, the technical discourse refers to the sort of language and terminology that employee would be expected to understand within that particular sector. So that's where the T-level came from. And that's the thinking really behind it. It's not, unique. It's I've given sort of, acknowledgement to where it's sort of the Innovation Institute and ETF, but it gives a good indication of what the T-level is all about. I'm just going to go back. So I'm going to be quite honest really, and sort of, explain a little bit about how awarding organisations, what we find ourselves in. So we, along with all other awarding organisations, find ourselves in quite a unique position really, where it's the first time, I think, in the history of vocational or technical education that we don't actually own the qualification or even provide certification for it. So we're almost acting as the conduit really between what employers on the route panel, have told the Department for Education what they want included in the technical part of the qualification, and then what the Institute has agreed that we can develop as an awarding organisation. So a couple of sort of bullet points really, I'm just going to talk through them. So if we look at sort of City and Guild Centre support, as a result of this unique collaboration, we've had to look at all the different types of support that centres, providers, stakeholders are going to need to have from us to be able to deliver the technical qualification, the TQ part of the T-level. So some of the challenges really along that, we've had many conversations with thousands of centres across the the country, and it's some of the challenges have been centres are having to move to delivering exam and controlled assessments based on theoretical concepts, a bit like A-levels really. These assessments now are all externally set and externally marked. So if a centre has previously been used to delivering the more traditional, as I call it, the VRQ, MVQ sort of type qualification, which has had unit-based assessments and unit-based delivery, it's required that centre to have a complete new and whole shift in the delivery models and their curriculum planning. Now, some teachers, who have always sort of taught sort of some technical skills or some of the more traditional a certain way, may be new and having to deliver a more pedagogical approach to teaching, based on the sort of constructivist, collaborative, integrative, reflective and inquiry-based learning, and having to have learners coming into centres full-time for 2 years. But that's quite a shift in how centres have had to work. So some of the differences, what are the differences with T-levels? Well, one of the main differences to other qualifications really is the size of the guided learning hours of the T-levels, up to, the T-levels themselves, some of them are 1,400 guided learning hours. And then we've got the length of the industry placement. And of course, that's a minimum as it stands of 315 guided learning hours. So altogether, it's 1,800 hours over 2 years. And if you look at a typical A-level program, which is normally 3 A-levels and maybe, it used to be ASs, it now tends to be PQs, you're looking at sort of 1,080, and, sort of, so it's quite significantly more. And I think that's the DFE are responsible for the industry placement and have done a lot of work around that, but it's still quite a challenge, I think, and it's different for a lot of the centres. The on-demand assessments, or or when learners are ready to be assessed, have now been replaced by dated entry exams, the same as A-levels and GCEs, with set retake windows. There is no alternative date for that. So that's all very different. I think grade boundaries may be new to some, where the grade boundaries are not preset, but, we've taken a awarding approach. And of course, uniform mark scales are used to aggregate grades. And of course, the component grading and overall T-level grading is different to what we've ever seen before. We look at, the core component is graded A star to E, the same as an A level. The occupational specialism is graded pass, merit and distinction. And the overall T-level grade is a pass, merit or distinction. So it is a very, very different and quite a challenge, I think, to sort of understand, particularly for universities to really understand how that grading process has been set up, really. But if we look at some similarities to it, we have found that centres who have delivered exam-based qualifications before, any exam-based qualifications, I'm going to use technical qualifications as an example, BTECs, etc., or the new reformed RQF qualifications, they have tended to have fared better in their understanding of T-levels, because the core exams that take place within the core of the T-level are very similar to the sort of exams that technical and RQF qualifications have. And of course, the occupational specialism of the T-level is really similar in structure to the synoptic assignments within the technical qualifications. So there are some similarities, obviously, if those centres have been delivering similar type qualifications. Now, we have always been regulated by Ofqual, but we now have a huge number of external stakeholders involved in the validating and content and assessment methodologies, certificating and development, policy and governance of T-levels, which is obviously has to be managed, because if we previously made any amendments to a specification, it was a case of informing Ofqual, making sure it went through the regulatory policy, and that was it. This is very different. We have to then, any amendments at all to any specification or any paperwork, it has to be agreed by IFATE, the institute, and then go through a submission process where they tell us. So there are lots and lots of differences within T-levels. And of course, the roles of these external stakeholders, that we work with on T-levels include IFATE. So IFATE, the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education, they're responsible for the TQ, the technical qualification. And that's the main classroom-based element of the T-level. And they're responsible for the procurement and the management of the TQs, as in the technical qualifications, where the industry placements are run and managed by the Department of Education, DfE. Now, prior to 2024, centres had to apply to the Department for Education to become an eligible provider. Now, next year, 2024, will be the 5th year of T-level rollout. And it's at this point at which they have completed the process and are broadening access to T-levels, so that they become part of the mainstream offer for all students aged 16, 17 and 18. So all providers currently funded to deliver 16 to 19 study programs will be eligible to deliver all of the available T-levels from September 2024. The ESFA, the sort of Education Skills Funding Agency, is the single agency accountable still for the funding of education and skills of T-levels. Ofqual remain responsible for the accreditation and the regulation of the TQ of the T-level. And of course, we heard from Vikki previously, who part of the ETF, and they have been supporting the delivery of T-levels since 2019, and were awarded a 4-year contract by the department to support providers, leaders, practitioners to deliver the new courses. So we work very, very closely with all of those external stakeholders, including the ETF. So finally, progression. Now, the Department for Education want T-levels to provide several progression options for students. So these include skilled employment, an apprenticeship, and onto higher technical education. So just to move on to the next slide, what I've done on this slide really is I've provided a link and a screen grab really for you of the types and resources that we have produced on our website, which are all accessible, no password protected, and at no cost to providers. And one of the biggest hints and tips I can give you, make use of all of these free resources, regardless of which awarding organisation you're with, because there's a raft of resources available free of charge for you from the awarding organisations. I think the only cost ones are when there are textbooks, which obviously the awarding organisations contract out to. So you can see just looking at there, what we've got available. I'm not going to go through them because you can read these and have a look at them at your leisure. But for new centres delivering T-levels, we have something called a pre-delivery support calendar with all of the getting ready to deliver T-levels events on. These include sort of things like curriculum planning, how to go through the approval process, familiarization webinars, going through each specification, module by module to make sure that centres fully understand what's essential teaching, what's mandatory. And for in-delivery centres, we have also a 12-month support calendar, slightly different content, because that really focuses on the teaching and learning webinars, and we really do a deep dive into exam prep for the employer set project, the theory exams and the occupational specialism. We have support sessions, webinars, give examples, how to deconstruct an exam question, what would be the best sort of model answer for this, what type of thing, how would you give these strategies to your students who, as we know, for the last 2 years have probably not been used to having any exams. So those skills that they came to you with, or should have come to you with, have either been lost or not gained at all. So, we've got all those issues. And of course, we have our Ask the Experts teams, very face-to-face. And the webinars, of course, they're all recorded and live and then sent to everybody. So I put links in there because it just might help you to sort of have a little navigate around what you can see. And every awarding organisation, regardless of what you're delivering, I would be having a look at their sites as well. So I'm just going to give a brief overview. I'm sure many of you are familiar with T-levels, or you possibly I don't know how you've escaped really sort of not hearing about them. So well done if you have. So City and Guilds is delivering 8 T-level contracts in 4 different sector areas. And these are awarded, as I mentioned, by IFATE, the Institute. So just to walk you through what each of those look like, this is the on-site construction. So this is, it has 3 different T-level routes. So what that means is City and Guilds have got the building services, engineering routes and on-site construction, whereas Pearson were awarded the design, surveying and planning T-level route. So we have those 2. So this is what the on-site looks like. So it's an overview of the pathways. It's now in its 2nd year of delivery. So it started first delivery in 2022, September 2021. So it's now in its 2nd year of delivery there. It's core goes across all of the core of construction, and the core really focuses on those sort of topics that you can see sort of outlined in that box there. So everybody does that, you know, the health and safety, construction design, and then those students will select one occupational specialism of the 4 that you can see there: carpentry, plastering, painting, decorating, or bricklaying. So it's quite straightforward, this one. Not quite so much straightforward if we move on to the building services information. Similar sort of information there, although the content differs. And the structure is a little bit more complex here due to the combined occupational specialisms in 3 of the pathways. Again, second year of delivery. So we've already gone through the exams, we've already gone through the ESP. You can see slightly different content for the core there. Much more focus is on sort of building services, engineering systems. So again, students will study the core, then they'll have a choice. They either pick one standalone specialism from Group A, which you can see here, or if they pick anything from Group B, these have to be combined because they're so related. So they're obviously bigger in size and they have double the amount of assessment. So if you do plumbing, you will naturally have to do heating engineering. If you do heating engineering and don't want to do plumbing, your only other option is ventilation. So you can see how those are slightly differently set up. Moving on to engineering. Again, the engineering and manufacturing T-levels are a lot larger. These are the larger size T-levels, almost sort of 1,000, I think just under 1,700 guiding learning hours in total with the industry placement. Now, there is significant maths and science content within the core, as students will not have the time within that programme to take an A-level in maths alongside these T-levels. You know, although there is extra funding for those students who want to do that, realistically, time-wise, you know, is it viable? So what happens with this one? City and Guilds are awarded the whole of the engineering and manufacturing. So they basically do, everyone does the core, then they will pick one of those pathways, either design, development, maintenance, installation, repair, or engineering, manufacturing. Then out of those pathways, they have a choice of 13 different occupational specialisms, which, as you can appreciate, can't remember every single one of them, but they range from, obviously, from, you know, electrical engineering down to aerospace. So there is lots and lots of choices within that for those particular learners. So moving on to management and administration. So this is the business and administration T-level. So City and Guilds have only one T-level route, which is the management administration. I think Pearson has 2, one in finance, and I think one in, and there's another one which is coming up, which could be HR. So we have this one. So with this one, this is the first year of delivery. So the first delivery was September 2022. So it's September 22. So obviously it's in its first year now. So forgive the error there in 2023. Core subjects, obviously project management, you know, research, analysis, things that map across the whole of the core of business and administration type skills. This is slightly more straightforward, dare I say, really. What I will say is there is only one core and then one choice of one occupational specialism from that. This, as I said, is in the first year. And we have really high numbers in this of students, you know, from the largest cross section of providers that we've had, which includes sort of obviously sixth form colleges, it's schools, it's sort of, you know, so huge numbers on this one, but it is fairly straightforward. Now, the last one is land. I'm coming almost to the end now. This is a little bit different again from the management and admin. Now, the animal care that you can see on the left-hand side has been delayed till 2024, and this is due to additional development. You know, we required an animal science occupational specialism, so it had to go back to the drawing board and make sure that we had a look at it again, and work with all our higher education providers to make sure we had suitable routes for progression. But the ALMP, which is the agriculture one, is due to begin delivery September this year. Slightly different in structure because there are two cores. There is the common core and the core pathway. And from the core pathway, they will choose an occupational specialism and that occupational specialism pathway. So it is slightly more complex because it covers such a wide range. When we look at land, it's a huge area. So I think I mentioned before, a large part of my role covers stakeholder engagement and progression to HE. And that means that I have to identify potential courses that align to T-level content. I've just put a link on there to the occupational maps because they're really good, so you can see the levels and how the progression maps work out really. And I have to look at these courses that align to the T-level content. Now, although all T-levels have UCAS points, equivalency in points to 3A levels, it's expected that most students taking the on-site or building services engineering T-levels are going to progress onto an accelerated or truncated apprenticeship and then onto employment. Now, for engineering and manufacturing T-levels, indications from providers is the majority of students are expecting to progress onto higher education. So a lot of work is being done with universities and the department to ensure that all of them have the information they need to decide on the entry requirements. And the DFE are also looking at an accelerated 2-year apprenticeship route for engineering and manufacturing. So you can see the different sorts of progression routes, you know, apprenticeships, accelerated or truncated apprenticeships, higher apprenticeships, the new higher technical qualifications, and of course, foundation degrees. So this is, I think, is my last slide, this one here, but this slide sort of gives you an idea really of for the management and administration pathway, what those routes could look like really. So it's a very high level overview of potential progression routes and potential entry requirements for management and admin. And that's been after feedback from our higher education business focus group. So you can see the entry requirements and the degree courses shown here, again, are just high level. I put together a group of 7 universities across the England, and we basically looked at, they validated the assessment materials with the objective of looking at their suitability for progression onto the degree courses. And this list isn't exhaustive. There are many more there. And of course, that's just the one for management and admin. We've already got one set up for engineering and manufacturing with all the similar information on, and I'm just in the process now of setting up a one for the animal science and animal care management of T-level for land, for progression onto existing animal science courses like veterinary nursing and zoology and such. So it's been a bit of a rough around, but again, I'm mindful of time because I know how Mark likes to keep to time here. So I'm going to just sort of end my presentation now. And hopefully, if there's any questions, I shall be able to come back off camera, can I?
Hi, Alison. Thank you very
Right.
much for that.
Sorry,
Yeah.
it was very fast going, but I'm very aware of your time, so I was just sort of looking at it.
Yeah, there was definitely the speed dating session of the ones we've had so far. So very comprehensive, and thank you hugely. We don't, as you probably worked out, we haven't got time to run some questions yet. But as I'm doing for some of the other sessions where we've slightly run out of time for questions, any questions that come in through the Q&A or to me via emails, because quite a lot of people are doing that today, I will pick those up subsequently, relay them to you. And if you've got time to give us some answers, just shortly after half term, we'll be posting any responses on the TLA resources part of our KFE website. Equally, we'll be putting presentations, video content, links and other things that various speakers choose to provide us. So a huge thank you, Alison. And I think that was very interesting. You had a lot of people viewing your session. I remember when we I remember when we did our very first one of these virtually as COVID started, and it was quite funny because I realised there's a function on here where you can call up delegates to the stage, but they don't know you're going to do it. So we've never actually done it yet. So if they inadvertently switch their camera on, they could appear there in their onesie or whatever it was that we were all wearing.
We've all made that mistake. We've all made that mistake.
Anyway, moving on.
Thank you.
Colin has appeared, and take care, and we'll catch up with you soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
And again, on behalf of KFE, welcome, Colin. I'll let you do your own introduction, technically speaking, if you want to explain who you are. But Colin, in simple terms, if you've read the programme, it's from World Skills UK, especially relevant to us because just in a month's time, we have KFE for Skills, which, as those of you that are involved with that or have experienced it in any way know, we have our own in-house inter-college competition for the Kent and Medway colleges in KFE on the 10th of March. It'll be hosted at Canterbury College. 24 industry sectors competitions taking place on that day. But obviously quite a lot has happened with respect to World Skills and the development of their own sort of specifications for competitions and approaches to it. And Colin is going to give us the lowdown and update. So over to you, Colin. Welcome.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for having me. So there's my screen. So as it says, my name's Colin Galley. I'm the Further Education Standards and Quality Manager at World Skills UK. My main role within World Skills UK is looking at the quality and standards within the national competition cycle, and also the development of some exciting new resources that we've got as well as part of my role. My background is I did 18 years in further education, working predominantly with special educational needs, but I also taught on level 2 programs in IT and music and drama, so quite a diverse background sort of for that. So just going to sort of give a brief overview of World Skills UK. So some people may know, some people may not, just for that. Then look at our national competitions program. And then, as the session was all about, sort of is looking how we integrate that into the curriculum and how that fits in with the inspectorates and qualifications and apprenticeship frameworks as well. So we at World Skills UK work under 3 pillars. So we inspire excellence. So within that pathway, we're looking at our careers advice resources. So we've got a set of careers advice and careers resources and the careers toolkit as part of our web pages, which are all free. I will make sure that the links are all shared after this session, and also looking at how we can engage young people into sort of some of the work we do within World Skills, but also sort of to give them that stepping stone into the world of work that they're interested in. Within our developing excellence strand, that's where sort of my department sits, which is the national competitions. And we've also got the international competitions as well. So from the national competition program, 30 of those competitions go international as well. So World Skills UK is a non-for-profit charity. We're part funded by the Department of Education, but we're also a member of World Skills, which is a global movement of over 80 countries who take part in competitions. We're the UK branch for that. And from that, so from the national competitions, we have then young people who will then go and compete again as part of Team UK in the international circuit. In September, October, November last year, we had the special edition, which should have been in Shanghai, but it was a special edition. So we had competitors going all the way across the world to compete against other people from other countries. At the end of those, the UK ranked 10th best in the world for skills. If you want more information about the international competitions, again, on our website, in skills, there's information about our international competitions. And through our Innovate stream, one of the things we look at that is we're looking at our training and assessment and teaching. So you may have heard of the Centre of Excellence, which fits under that, our innovations network. We've got our a team who look at reports and policies and how we can sort of be part of that. So again, on our website, we've got things about the levelling up, digital skills and green skills, sort of that we've done reports on, and independent research as part of that to show how we can be, how taking part in competitions and being part of World Skills UK can benefit the young people that we're working with. So skills competitions, as the majority of people will probably know, are sort of there as a method of assessment. We have our skills competitions. So the skills that we run, we have industry experts who come and design, we call them our test projects, which are our briefs and our mark schemes. These are people from education who are working in sort of sectors within industry, and they're there to assess that individual's knowledge, practical skills, employability skills, and sort of their skills, knowledge, and behaviours as well. And with a competition, it's set within that timed environment. So our national competition programme fits quite nicely alongside the endpoint assessment, and how that sort of administered and how we put the competitions together. We work sort of through stages as we go through, and I'll discuss that further when we go through the slide deck. The main benefit sort of for that for individuals is that fine-tuning of that those critical skills, attributes and behaviors that are valued by employers. So every year we send out and do research with employers to look and see what skills, knowledge and behaviors that they're looking for the young people coming towards them. And we pass that back through our networks, through the work that we do, through sort of the information that we provide to show that. And a lot of things that employers, as you are probably all aware, are things like problem solving, self-reflection, time management, that ability to work under pressure. And that's some of the things that are built into our national competition program to sort of show those young people sort of what they can achieve in such a short space of time, but also sort of the level that they're at against other people across the country at the same time. And of course, we're looking at sort of bringing that world-class skill. So I mentioned about the international competitions, and part of our international team, we have an insights team within that. And what they do is when they go out to the international competitions, they're talking to other countries, they're talking to competitors, to training managers. They then bring that back to the United Kingdom and disseminate that through our network. So we're learning what's happening outside of the United Kingdom to see sort of where we can help upskill the young people, but also understand what is happening outside of sort of where we are at this moment in time. And the big thing that we've been working on a lot at this moment in time is benchmarking resources and benchmarking against a standard. So we have in the pilot stage at this moment in time, we've got 27 skills that we're working on. So we've got 17 which are based around initial assessments, and we've got 10 which are lesson plans, assignment briefs, and marking schemes. Again, I'll make sure all that is shared with you, which you can go off and sort of use. Again, it's all free. Within this, what we've done is we've benchmarked that against the national average from the previous year. So all the information that we're using is real data. It's from the competitions from previous years, and we've looked at what the performance has been like, and to give you an understanding of where your learners sit for that, and also sort of to give them an understanding of where they would come and where they would be if they were to take part in the national competition program. The feedback we've had from the resources so far has been really positive. We are busy converting them across to our digital learning platform, which we call the Learning Lab. So they will be all housed in one place with other resources we've got in there as well. So our competition timeline for this year So this is a crucial point for us because in a couple of weeks' time, our registration opens. So on the 27th of February to the 24th of March, that's when you can register for WorldSkills UK competitions. How you do that is quite simple. If you go to our website and have a look at the skill that you're interested in, it will give you the information about that skill and it will have a button to say apply and register for the competitions. Clicking through that, you go through the registration process. There's two processes we have for registration. The first one is what we call a surrogate or tutor trainer one, where you can register learners on their behalf. When you finish registering your learners, what it will do is we'll send a web link to the learners via email for them to accept their terms and conditions that they're happy to be part of the competition. There's also the individual route as well. So individuals, learners can go on and register for competitions themselves. The big thing sort of for that is if you are registering learners, it might sound sort of very, very strange, but make sure the learners are aware that this email is coming. If they don't accept the terms and conditions, they can't take part in the competition. And also that they have actually had a look at what the competition is asking for to see that they're happy for that. One of the things that we do find is that a lot of learners are registered and then get the first stage of competition and find that it's a bit too much for them. So it's a bit sort of getting them to have a look and see if they find it that's something that they'll be interested in them. Up until the 12th of May, we've got our entry stage. If you've had any dealings with WorldSkills before, this was previously known as the passive stage. We've changed that to entry stage. And this is that first point of competition activity. For some skills, it's a filtration. So things like hairdressing get over 300 registrations. When they hit the national qualifiers, they only have a limited number of places that they can accommodate across the whole United Kingdom. So they send out a project that will help filter down from 350 down to say 150 or 200 so they can see the top 100, 200, whatever it is, can move through the next stage. At the end of every stage, learners get feedback and the points of contact, the tutors, trainers get feedback as well. And the areas that they've done well and the areas that areas for development in their own personal development from that. And that's wrote by the judging team. So the judges are normally industry experts, people with a wealth of knowledge in that particular industry, and they give sort of that feedback to it. So there's two types of feedbacks we have. So there's a general feedback about sort of everybody, and then there's the individual feedback from that. Those that progress through to the national qualifiers, these are on a hybrid model still at the moment. So some are virtual, where you will do it at your home center and you will either send the product to them or you'll have a video call or a video for that. And some are physical. So again, when you go onto the web pages and look at the skills you're interested in, it should be able to tell you if you're going to have to travel. So it'll give a physical venue or it will let you know online. Some of the skills are still working on their qualifier venues and what they're doing, and it may just have more information to follow, but they will keep you informed all of the time of what's happening for that. 13th of July, we're looking at announcing the finalists. So through WorldSkills UK website and through our media channels, you'll find out if your learner has progressed through to the national finals. In September to October, the competition organising partners and our sponsors will do some development training. Again, that's a hybrid. Some are physical, and learners will we will go to a physical location. Some are virtual and can do it online, and they're trained up on any equipment they may have to use, any techniques that they've got to do that may not be part of their normal qualification or apprenticeship framework. So that everybody's on a level playing field. And then in November, we have our national finals. Last year, we did 7 locations, 63 skills across 7 locations across the United Kingdom. We're still planning what this year's national finals will look like, so stay tuned to find out more. As soon as we know more and we're publishing it, we'll make sure that sort of Mark and the team gets that information as well to share with everybody. So the competition stages, as I went through sort of from that, but just to give you a sort of little bit more detail in that. So at this point in time, we're in the pre-competition activity. So that's where we have young people and educators going on the website, looking at our technical handbooks, which have information in there about sort of previous year's projects and things they would have to do. Our entry stage, starts after registration. So as you can see, the numbers that are going up on the left-hand side. So we're starting at this moment in time with about 15,000 young people engaging with WorldSkills UK in different ways. By the time we hit the entry stage, we're looking at about 3,000 plus young people who will be taking part in our entry stage. National qualifiers, again, as we've done the entry stage, we're looking at about 2,500 to get down to the national finals, which is 550. So you see, as that pyramid goes in, the number of people who get to that point diminishes from that respect of the numbers, but the quality is sort of increasing from that. And as I said, every stage feedback is given to make sure that the learners know what they've done well and areas sort of to work forward for the future. Then for those 30 skills that are going international, they have the young people who are age eligible and meet score criteria are invited to be part of squad or team development. At that point, they're normally on an 18-month training development program with our international training managers to whittle that down to about 25, 35 who become Team UK, and then we'll go off and represent the United Kingdom. So from the start to the bottom, I think those numbers are not huge compared to sort of what will be in technical and vocational education at this moment in time. And that's something that we're really doing. We're really trying to grow that. We have no caps on the number of people who can register. The main thing we say is when you are looking at registered learners, you look at the entry criteria for that particular competition, and you have those discussions with those learners to make sure that they understand what they have to do and what they will be doing through the competition, and they're happy with that. I know time's sort of racing away. Hopefully this will work. This is just a little video about embedding into the curriculum. So hopefully this will work. If it doesn't,
Our competitions support educators to develop high-quality technical skills with their learners and apprentices. It will provide inspiration to improve your teaching, training, and learning techniques. You can benchmark performance and learn from peers across the UK. It will grant you access to additional resources and equipment. Support your continued professional development by updating and extending your subject specialist skills and knowledge, and help your delivery of the curriculum inspection framework. Our competitions are for everyone. Sign up your students and apprentices and watch them develop excellence at work.
So it was just a little breather, so you don't have to listen to me sort of the whole time. So looking at that from the curriculum perspective, breaking that down to the three areas: intent, implementation, impact. One of the things that I've been working on is to produce an EIF document, education inspection framework document, that lists this down, so it helps sort of when you're doing your self-assessment reports, quality improvement plans. And again, we'll share that with everybody sort of on the call at this time as well. So you've got that, so you can use that to see how you can embed this further into it. Looking at sort of those three key areas that sort of we're having to sort of map out to. So when we're talking about our intent, we're looking at it from this point of view of new methodology for assessment, looking at how we assess the technical theoretical knowledge, but also the learned information that they've got as well. So what they've learned previously as they come into where you are, and sort of for the competition program as well. And so I think these things we're really sort of focusing as well as that soft skill development and that distance traveled. And what we're trying to do is help map out sort of the journey that every learner goes on. Implementation of that, so we're looking at the teaching and learning and assessment models, how we integrate that into sort of pressure tests, schemes of work, schemes of lesson plans, how that will be sequenced as part of the curriculum design. At the moment, the resources we've been doing as part of the development excellence are about an hour to 2 hours long. What we're looking at is trying to create 8 to 10 hours worth of content that would do skill specific, but also employability, soft skills, transferable skills built into one package that you can dip into. So it's got teacher-led sessions, individual self-directed study sessions as well. So it becomes a package that should be easier to embed into the curriculum. The big thing that we're looking at is that impact. What is the impact of doing all this? And it's looking at that robust assessment, having a point, so that benchmarking point to see sort of where they're sitting, how it fits with the Gatesby benchmarks, and looking at that best practice that we bring back from that national and international competitions that we've got, and the information that we get from the judges, from the localized competition activity that happens as well, that we World Skills like to get involved in, to get that feedback of what's happening in education in the regions, so we can really sort of then try and tailor some of the resources to help. Some of the benefits of taking part from the learner's perspective, and these aren't just things that we've made up, these is part of research that we've had in the past, and a lot of the things that we found from learners that they've said to us when they've given us feedback is it's helped them sort of achieve their qualification goals. It's given them a new sort of dimension into sort of how they're moving forward. They're seeing things from a different perspective. It's raised their aspirations. And for those that have gone through the competition cycle and gone international as well, their journey sort of has really opened up massively. For some who finish just at who do the national program only and are not going to go international, the benefits that they've had has been absolutely massive. They've been able to have something that they've been able to talk about in interviews. They've been able to express doing something slightly different, which makes them stand out from the other candidates that are taken in for interviews. And some of the things it's also done as well is help sort of highlight some of the areas where they are really sort of striving in. So as a young lady that we I'm doing a session with next week, who is currently working in STEM, and she's a female. And when she started her competition journey on the competition she was on, I think there was 2 females in that. And for the industry that she's in, she's been a real advocate for that and used the competition element to really sort of strive that forward, to show that it is for everybody. Everybody can take part, and this is what you can achieve from that. And she always talks passionately about sort of her time within competitions. From yourselves and the tutors and trainers, it's looking at sort of that benchmarking. I keep on going about benchmarking. That's our sort of buzz at the moment. It's that giving back, sort of that opportunity to see sort of where your learners are, and where they're, again, their areas for development, are areas of good practice for that. Our continual professional development is part of World Skills UK. We've got CPD sessions, we've got our spotlight sessions. We have lots of resources that are built in our learning lab. So there's some that are just for educators and some that are for learners, so you can upskill yourselves for that. And also sort of passing that back, that current technical developments and skills needs in industry as well, because as part of our research, we're looking into all that all the time. And for that that bigger picture, that college and training providers, again, it's that sort of that exposure to sort of a national stage. If your competitor and your learner gets through to national finals, you're part of sort of that real sort of small number of young people who are taking part in it, but that wider picture from that. Years ago, people may remember the NEC, it was live, the skills show, and having your learner on there, your logo for your education, sort of your training provider as part of that young person going through that journey, can have massive sort of impact on sort of that next generation and inspire them to go, yeah, oh yeah, we want to be part of that as well. Again, some of the benefits of taking part. So again, from the learners, these are some statistics that we've pulled off. So 97% it said improve their technical skills, 93% said improve their personal employability skills, and 90% said they could use the skills that they have developed through the competition cycle and being able to apply them. And again, some of the ones for that extend the pedagogical skills and knowledge of that development opportunities. And also there's the opportunities outside of just training learners up, but to become further involved in World Skills, where you've got judges, coaches, experts. So we have, as part of our, again, going on the international team, we have international training managers, and there's opportunities that come up now and again, sort of for new international training managers to come on board for that. So again, keep sort of an eye on the World Skills website for anything that's coming up for that. Some of the things that I'm working on at the moment is how we help embed this. So April to May, we'll be looking at sort of coming out and working with senior leaders, with sort of managers on sort of how to embed this as part of their self-assessment report and quality improvement plans. In July, looking at how we can help to sequence this as part of their your schemes of learning. In September, we're looking at trying promotional material for use with learners.